who remain separated years after the Trump administration took children from their parents at the border, a policy that will be a permanent stain on our country's conscience. Certainly, more remains to be done. I believe the solution to our longstanding border challenges is for Congress to finally fix our broken immigration system and expand legal pathways of migration for vetted individuals who want to contribute to our society. Doing so will allow border personnel to focus on real threats to the Homeland Security, but put human smugglers out of business and help ensure migrants are treated with dignity, goals everyone should agree on. But a question remains: do we want to finally overcome our border challenges, or do we want to use this issue for partisan attacks? I guess we'll see in today's hearing. I thank the chairman and look forward to our discussion today, and I yield back.
Thank you, Ranking Member. Other members of the committee are reminded that opening statements may be submitted for the record. I'm pleased to have a distinguished panel of witnesses before us today on this very important topic. I ask that our witnesses please rise and raise their right hand. Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you will give before this committee today, the Committee on Homeland Security of the United States House of Representatives, will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you. You may be seated. Let the record reflect that the witnesses have answered in the affirmative. Thank you. I'd now like to formally introduce our witnesses to everyone today. Ms. Rebecca Keesling is a family law attorney from Michigan who tragically lost her two sons, Kyler and Caleb, to fentanyl poisoning. We extend our condolences and thank her for being here. The Honorable Mark Lamb is Sheriff of Pinal County, Arizona. Sheriff Lamb oversees a county the size of Connecticut and has worked diligently to keep its population safe from the many effects of the border crisis. Mr. Robert Trenchel is President and CEO of the Yuma Regional Medical Center in Yuma, Arizona. Dr. Trenchel brings nearly 20 years of healthcare experience and medical management experience and currently oversees the hospital overflow created by the flow of illegal migration. Dr. David Bier, am I pronouncing your name correctly? Bier, like the beverage. Cool. Mr. Bier is the Associate Director of Immigration Studies at Cato Institute, focusing on border security and immigration. I thank all the witnesses for being here today, and I now recognize Ms. Keesling for 5 minutes to summarize her opening statement.
Chairman Green, Ranking Member, pardon me? Chairman Green, Ranking Member Thompson, and distinguished members of the committee, I'm Rebecca Keesling. I'm a mother. I'm the mother to Caleb and Kyler, as well as 3 teenage daughters. Our family's been through a lot. I lost my 2 sons. Caleb was age 20 and Kyler was age 18 on July 29th of 2020. It was absolutely a perfect storm. There was also a 17-year-old girl, Sophia Harris, who died along with them. And the drug dealer, Lorenzo Brabo, was spared by Narcan. And he ended up getting 8 to 15 years for killing 3 people. Because to the law enforcement, this was a breakthrough case. My former law partner, her husband is a sheriff deputy, he's a detective in the next town over. He tells me he's got a stack. Every day there's a stack of dead people. And there's no leads. But in our case, there was a lead. The drug dealer was there, and he was another addict. And so because he survived, they had leads to who he got it from, and they actually could try to start tracing it back. And the law enforcement made it clear to me that this fentanyl came from Mexico. It came from our southern border. I didn't know what fentanyl was. I didn't know what Narcan was. I had heard of the opioid epidemic. I thought, people are getting prescription drugs and getting addicted and then getting it on the streets, and that it affects their ability to work. I didn't know that people were dying. I didn't know that my boys were taking anything that could kill them. They didn't think that they were either. They thought that they were safe with pills, and I'm going to read some statements from my sons that they wrote shortly before their deaths, and you'll see that that's exactly the case. But the government knew. The government's known for years and years. The year my son Caleb was born, 2020, there were roughly 20,000 drug-related deaths in the United States. The year they died, it was 2000, it was the year he was born. And the year that they died, 2020, there were over 100,000. For 2021, almost 110,000. The CDC I saw yesterday says that fentanyl deaths rose 22% from 2020 to 2021. I mean, it's unbelievable. You would think that one death from fentanyl coming across our southern border would be enough to sound the alarm. And my kid's story was high profile because 3 young people died. There was another child from our hometown who died the same day. It wasn't in the news. You don't hear about it because it was just one death. So it wasn't like extraordinary. I found out from the funeral home that they have tons of these cases regularly. I'm from Rochester Hills, Michigan. We were, in Money Magazine, ranked in top 10 cities live in America a few years ago. Our school is top 5 in Michigan. But this all started at the schools. And the law enforcement are doing all they can, but they usually don't have leads. You have to stop it from its source. Now, if we had Chinese troops lining up along our southern border with weapons aimed at our people, with weapons of mass destruction aimed at our cities, you damn well know you would do something about it. We have a weather balloon from China going across our country. Nobody died, and everybody's freaking out about it. But 100,000 die every year, and nothing's being done. Not enough is being done. Numbers are going up, not down. And you talk about children being taken away from their parents. My children were taken away from me. 100,000 Americans every year are having their children, 200,000 because it's both parents, right? Are having their children taken away from them. This should not be politicized. It's not about race. Fentanyl doesn't care about race. You talk about welcoming those crossing our border, seeking protection. You're welcoming drug dealers across our border. You're giving them protection. You're not protecting our children. I'm in support groups on Facebook where there's thousands of parents who have lost their children. Every day, faces are added. It's dehumanizing. It's demoralizing. There's parents who are, they paint the chairs purple, and they kind of make shrines for their children. And I see those purple chairs because purple is the, color for a drug death. And I don't use the term drug overdose because this was not an overdose. This was murder. My children got fake Percocets that were fentanyl. There was no Percocet in it at all. And it's a homicide, not overdose. But they have these purple chairs. And I saw that and I thought, I don't ever want to have purple chairs. I don't need a reminder. I don't want to remember my sons for how they died. I want to remember them for how they lived. But I'm here testifying today because there are other people who need to remember. I don't need a purple chair in my house. Congress needs a purple chair. The White House needs a purple chair to never forget about all those who are being slaughtered. This is a war. Act like it. Do something. My son Kyler, shortly before he died, this is what he wrote. And I want to share their writing so they can have a chance to testify. He wrote his goals. Number 1, stay away from drugs and alcohol. It's not worth it. 2, surround myself with good influence people. 3, stay away from nicotine. 4, treat people with more respect. Don't burn bridges. 5, find another method to cope that works for me. 6, get closer with Jaden. 7, start doing something physical to get in shape. 8, start working a lot to stay focused. 9, finish school. And he did. The day before he died, he graduated. 10, have a better relationship with my parents. 11, do anything and everything to better myself and my health. 12, listen when told to do something. 13, don't F up pro bono or I'll have a felony on my record. 14, report to any and every drug test. 15, don't follow my birth mom's steps. 16, be there for my brother, my only blood brother. 17, I can do anything that I put my mind and effort to. Okay, I'd like to have the photos of my sons shown. I have just a few photos that you can see, again, to put a face to this issue. This is not just a concept. We also found Caleb's testimony he wrote out weeks earlier because he wanted to start speaking in schools and to tell other kids why not to do drugs, why not to ever try it. He said, my name is Caleb Keesling. I'm 20 years old. I've dabbled in drugs. I've never touched crack, meth, or heroin as I have grown up watching my birth mother ruin her life and watch all her friends pass away from heroin overdoses. And I've also growing up hearing how destructive those 3 substances are, so I've stayed away from them and do not see myself ever trying them. Again, he thought he was safe. He didn't want to die. He says, I was an athlete. I played soccer from a young age all the way up until my junior year. I got A's in school, was student council president, and ended up graduating early. And I've held a full-time job since I was 16 years old. I'm extremely intelligent. I have my parents to thank for that, as they stressed I keep my nose in a book, teaching me that knowledge is true power and is the only thing nobody can ever take from you. Before I got caught, I had already realized that my life needed to change. I'd been in the process of signing on with the Navy. I scored in the 90th percentile on the PCAT test. I have too many routes available to me not to succeed. So even if the military is in my path, I'm going to have a good future. I can feel that in my bones. I'm built to succeed, and my issues have only made me stronger. My shortcomings don't even begin to define who I am, and don't even begin to speak to what I've been through and overcame. I can only claim just a little credit for it because it's by the Lord's grace and protection that I'm alive and here to tell my story. He has watched over my whole life, even when I refused to accept his presence and existence.
Rebecca, we're gonna need to move to our next witness, okay? I know I can't imagine. None of us here can imagine. I'm so sorry. But there will be questions, and you'll get to share more in a moment, okay?
Okay, thank you.
Sheriff Lamb, I now recognize you for your testimony. Thank you. You have 5 minutes.
Chairman Green, esteemed members, thank you. I'm going to go through this quick. I hope I don't sound like a livestock auctioneer here. My heart goes out to Rebecca and so many other families. I am the sheriff of Pinal County, Arizona. My county is located between Phoenix and Tucson. It is approximately the size of the state of Connecticut. We are not a border county. However, we are 52 miles from the border at our closest point through the desert. We have an Indian reservation on the south end, which actually runs into Mexico, and the cartel for decades has pushed people through. It hasn't changed recently. We are also 71 miles off the border on the I-10 interstate. This is important because the I-10 interstate is one of the main arteries for human and drug trafficking into America. The drugs that make it into your states come through my county at one point. Let me give you some of our statistics just to show you how much this affects us. We have had a 377% increase in the last 2 years for traffic stops involving human smuggling and trafficking. We have had a 461% increase in pursuits involving human smuggling, putting my citizens at risk. Now, the drivers are predominantly American, but oftentimes they are juveniles, being actively recruited by the cartels on social media, paying them thousands dollars per person that they transport into my community. A lot of what we see are not layups. You hear the term layups. Layups are people that come through the border, turn themselves into Border Patrol, and claim asylum. What I deal with in the Tucson sector in my county is we deal with the gotaways. Those people you hear about, the gotaways, that's in our county. These are people that are going to be dressed in camouflage clothes, carpet shoes, and backpacks like this. They're littered throughout my desert. I just picked these up Sunday morning, and this is what I see every day. This is the sign of somebody who's trying to come in undetected and illegally into this country. The problem is that we are allowing the weak policies that we have in place here on a national level, and the lack of fortitude to secure our border has created an opportunity for the cartels. Not only do we deal with the criminal element, we deal with the humanitarian element. Every summer we spend our helicopter, our resources. It's a drain on my resources. My canines are dedicated solely to interdiction. I have an anti-smuggling unit. My helicopter, we had 10 events yesterday alone. One of them was a 911 call. We had a gentleman we had to go find that the cartel left for dead a year or so ago. When we found him, he was laying under a Palo Verde tree. We had to give him 3 bags of IV to bring him back. And while we were doing that, there were 7 more 911 calls on the board for lost, injured, or left behind smugglers. The people are being tricked and trapped into coming here by these cartels because of our policies or lack of. When they come here, the women are being raped. We had a woman we caught a while back that had a baggie full of pills, and we said, "What are these pills?" And she says, "Well, when I came across the border, I knew I'd be raped multiple times. These are morning after pills." Have we lost our moral compass so bad that we put politics in front of people? They're raping the women, raping the children, using them as pawns, oftentimes putting them in the sex trade here in America. Slavery is as prolific, is super prolific nowadays. They're extorting the men. The cartel knows this. How many times can they sell you a pill? Once. How many times can they sell you a woman? Hundreds. How many times can they sell you a child? Hundreds. And this is what the cartel is doing. I don't want to dwell on that, but I want to get onto the drugs. In our county, we have seen a 600% increase in fentanyl in my community. In 2018, we had 0 M30 fentanyl pill seizures. In 2019, we had around 700 pills. In 2020, we had over 200,000 pills. In 2021, we had over 1.2 million pills. And this last year, we had over 1.4 million pills come into my community. I hope that one of you will ask me about xylazine, which is something we're now finding in our communities. I want to get on to the children because I think this is important, because this is what deals with Rebecca and so many other families. In the state of Arizona in 2021, we lost 44 children to poisonings under the age of 17. 7 were under the age of 1 year old. If that doesn't mobilize the forces of this country to stop this problem, I don't know what will. This is what we deal with on a daily basis, and I hear that 90% come through the ports. Those numbers are not what we're seeing. It's 50-50, 52-48. And the fact that they think they can bring it through our borders is not something to brag about, that we catch it. Because what that tells me is the cartel is so confident that they're going to get those drugs through your borders, they come right through our front door. We have saved, with the amount of seizures we've had, have saved probably this entire country multiple times over. This is something we need to address. I know I'm over time. I just want to say thank you to the partners that we have with Border Patrol, ICE. I thank you for the Stone Garden funds, which allow us to help you in your mission. We've got a tremendous amount of work to do. I will tell you the lines of communication were severed when this administration took over. We have 0 communication with the federal side, which is disappointing, something we lost when this administration came in. I would also just like to say in closing that we've got to do better on saying that the messaging, the media, the politicians, you got to stop saying this is a manufactured crisis. The statistics I've given you say otherwise. And you have to stop saying that the border is secure, because the border is not secure. And with that, I will turn it back over to the chairman, and I thank you, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here and look forward to answering questions.
Thank you, Sheriff Lamb. I now recognize Mr. Trenchel for 5 minutes to summarize his opening statement.
Good morning, Chairman Green and members of the Homeland Security Committee. Thank you for inviting me here today to give you a firsthand account of the impact that open borders have had on our hospital and community over the past year and more. Yuma Regional Medical Center is a 406-bed hospital that offers a full range of acute care services. The closest hospitals that do what we do are located 180 miles away in Phoenix or San Diego. Given our geographic location, our hospital and health system holds a deep responsibility of keeping local families close to home for care whenever possible. For many who live here, traveling out of town for care is simply an unbearable challenge. They depend on us to be here. Our mission to meet the needs of our community is always at the forefront of every decision. I also want to acknowledge the work and heart of our staff at Yuma Regional Medical Center who continue to care for patients each and every day. They provide the same high level of care for every patient. We do not treat anyone differently, and we take pride in that. If your mother or grandchild walks through our doors, or if a migrant walks through our doors, they would receive the same level of care. Over the last approximately year and a half, we've had a highly significant number of migrants cross the border into our community. Our hospital saw an increase in the number of migrants seeking care beginning in the late fall, early winter of 2021. They arrive to our hospital room in a multitude of ways. Some patients come to us via Border Patrol, who typically release them from custody upon arrival. Other patients walk in, take taxis, some even come by Uber. As I've said, we are the only acute care hospital in the area, which means diversion to another facility is not an option. We are it. Some migrants come to us with minor ailments, but many of them come in with significant disease. We've had migrant patients on dialysis, cardiac catheterization, and in need of heart surgery. Many are very sick. They have long-term complications of chronic disease that have not been cared for. Some end up in the ICU for 60 days or more. One of the largest cohorts we have seen are maternity patients who present with little or no prenatal care. These higher risk pregnancies and births result in higher complication rates and longer hospital stays. Due to a lack of prenatal care, many of these babies require a stay in our neonatal intensive care unit, some for a month or more at a time. There are language and cultural concerns with migrant patients, and we work through those, but when you consider the volume and associated case management that come with it, resources have to support this as well. Migrants often require 3 times the amount of human resources to resolve their cases and provide them a safe discharge as defined by CMS. That effort includes assistance with locating families, making sure they have a safe place to go when they are discharged, arranging and sometimes purchasing durable medical equipment when needed. We have paid for emergency air transport when they need a higher level of care. We've paid for hotel rooms, taxis, and car seats. We do these things because it's the right thing to do from a humanitarian perspective, but it also allows us to open a hospital bed sooner for another patient in our community. None of these expenses are included in the $26 million figure. Our reality is this: we have delivered over $26 million in uncompensated care to these individuals in the 12-month period of time from December 21 to November of 2022. That's an auditable figure. Let me assure you, it is not an approximation. That number comes from a detailed review of unpaid patient bills directly attributed to migrant patients. $26 million in uncompensated care is simply an unsustainable business model. While this is a huge number that we have validated, the point is that any number is not acceptable. It is an unsustainable model to have a hospital like ours bear the entire burden of paying for migrant health care. No business or service can survive ongoing large-scale expense without any offsetting revenue. Because of this surge of migrant care, we've had to hire additional staff at a time when healthcare labor post-pandemic is higher than ever. Every dollar in uncompensated care has a direct impact on our hospital. Migrant patients are receiving free care. They have no ability to pay. We have no ability to bill anyone. We don't know their final destination. We don't know anything about them. Let me put this into perspective. $26 million is equal to the benefits and salaries to support 212 bedside nurses. The city of Yuma has 100,000 people. We've had 300,000 people cross the border in Yuma in 1 year. That's 3 times the population of Yuma coming across the border. We are the only hospital within a 3-hour radius, which means they come to us. We've contacted our state and federal leaders. No one has a solution. They're willing to listen and are empathetic, but so far we have no solutions or any reimbursement for the care. We've been at this for well over a year now. On behalf of our entire hospital care team, I'm here seeking your leadership and support to find a payer source for the care we have already provided and will continue to provide in the future, and to put long-term solutions into action that will support our daily commitment to be here for our community for years to come. One hospital should not and cannot bear the healthcare costs of a national migrant problem that is deeply impacting Arizona and our community. We need a revenue source for this patient population so we can sustainably provide high-quality care to all comers and remain viable for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Trenchel. I now recognize Mr. Bier for 5 minutes to summarize his opening statement.
Chairman Green, Ranking Member Thompson, and distinguished members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify. For more than 4 decades, the Cato Institute has produced original research on immigration, showing a freer, more orderly, and more lawful immigration system creates a freer, wealthier, and safer country. We see people as the ultimate resource, that given the freedom to thrive, people, regardless of birthplace, are a benefit to our society. Unfortunately, the U.S. immigration system is so narrow and so backlogged that most people who want to come to this country have no legal way to do so. They have no line. As a result, the U.S. ranks in the bottom third of wealthy countries for its immigrant share of the population. This restrictive system is harming our communities, from the largest cities to the smallest towns. The worker shortage, averaging nearly 10 million open jobs per month, has cost the U.S. nearly $1 trillion in lost productivity in the last year alone. Population decline is eroding tax bases in cities both large and small. Nearly 3/4 of America's counties had more deaths than births in the last year. And U.S. population growth is the lowest it has ever been in our entire history. This restrictive system also causes illegal immigration, which can tear apart communities when employees, employers, and spouses of U.S. citizens are deported. Immigrants are not undermining the safety of U.S. communities, just the opposite. Census Bureau data show that legal and illegal immigrants are half as likely to end up behind bars as U.S.-born residents. During the 1990s, when the immigrant population grew faster than it had at any point in over a century, crime fell rapidly. It fell faster and further in immigrant-dense communities. About 350,000 immigrants serve in protective occupations as police officers, detectives, and private security. Immigrants work with police to solve crimes. About 315,000 immigrants right now are awaiting status based on their cooperation with local investigations. And there are countless examples of U.S. communities turned around by the economic revitalization brought by immigrants. Immigrants increase state and local tax revenues by over $250 billion per year, more resources to keep communities safe. The committee is right to investigate the scourge of fentanyl deaths, but immigrants are not the cause. Fentanyl is overwhelmingly smuggled through ports of entry, largely by U.S. citizens. U.S. citizens accounted for 86% of convicted fentanyl traffickers in 2021. Despite arresting over 700,000 illegal entrants so far this year, less than 1% of CBP's fentanyl seizures have come from people carrying it across the border illegally. The restrictions on trade and travel that started in 2020 have only exacerbated the problem. Because fentanyl is 50 times more potent than heroin, it can supply the same market with far fewer trips. So with fewer trips and more scrutiny in 2020 and 2021, traffickers switched from heroin to fentanyl, and fentanyl deaths doubled. Border policies have failed victims by making drugs more potent and deadly. Congress should focus on helping drug users, not banning immigrants. The crackdown on asylum under Title 42 has also failed to secure the border. Now that requesting asylum is no longer an option, evasion of Border Patrol has increased 5-fold from 2019 to 2023, forcing immigrants to cross in more remote, more rural areas of the border has led to more suffering and death, which is straining rural hospitals. We have seen repeatedly that closing off legal options to immigrate creates illegal immigration, while opening them up reduces it. The administration's new parole sponsorship programs for Cubans, Haitians, Venezuelans, and Nicaraguans are already working to reduce illegal migration by those populations by over 90%. These programs empower ordinary Americans in every community to help fix the border. Congress should work with them. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bier. Members will be recognized by order of seniority for their 5 minutes of questioning. An additional round of questioning may be called for after all members have been recognized. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes of questions. Before I start, I just want to share a few things because it's been talked about this being a decades-long problem. It has been. There's no doubt there's been a problem. But in the entire previous administration's 4 years, 2.4 million encounters. In just 2 years, we've had 4.7 million encounters, 1.2 million gotaways. I can do that math. 5.9 million people. 25 states in the United States have populations less than 4.6 million. Let that number sink in. And the removal of the policies on day one, the executive orders that were written and reversing policies implemented that solved many of this, or really began to solve this problem, were done away with. And a surge of people came to our border. And the drug cartels have taken advantage of the situation by the neutralizing effects that I talked about in my opening statement. It was also mentioned earlier about the humanitarian problems from previous administrations. I remember sitting in this committee right over there when I was a freshman, and there was this big to-do about 2 migrant deaths. We weren't in charge at that time, but it was a big hullabaloo because there were 2 migrant deaths. Any death, we should make a big deal out of it. In the past 2 years, under this administration's policies, under Mayorkas' reckless behavior, reckless, border policies, 1,400 migrants have died. Here's one just floating in the river. 1,400. We talk about it was a humanitarian crisis in the previous administration. Nothing now. 1,400. Over 1,400. Yes, this is Mayorkas' failure. Mr. Lamb, or Sheriff Lamb, I'd like to start with you today. Mr. Bier was mentioning some statistics about who's carrying the drugs into the country. Those carpet shoes you showed earlier, do you think those are counted in his statistics? The video that I showed earlier of all this just parade of people carrying drugs into our country, are they counted in his statistics?
Mr. Chairman, no, sir. And I find it comical that a lot of researchers and politicians like to tell us what's going on the border, but they don't ever come down to the border to actually see it in person. We're telling you statistics that we see every day. Here's the remnants of it. This tells you everything you need to know, and I've got thousands of these in hundreds of spots throughout my county.
Yeah, those aren't in the statistics, and they're certainly not coming through the ports of entry, are they, Sheriff Lamb?
No, they are not coming through the ports of entry.
Okay. Thank you. Rebecca, I really appreciate you being here, and I know the difficulty of you being here. One of our fellow witnesses today, Sheriff Lamb, mentioned and talked about the flow of fentanyl. He's 55 miles from the border. You're in Michigan, I think, right? Quite a ways from the border. Do you mind elaborating a little bit on how it's impacted your community? And I mean, you shared your story, but you're with other parents who've lost their children. Can you share the story of how it's impacting your community?
Well, I'll tell you, in the support groups, there have been some parents who have committed suicide, siblings who have. It's devastating families. It's been very difficult for my daughters. One daughter, she went off to Michigan State and came home after semester. It was just too painful. Now she is attending in our hometown at Oakland University. One of my son's friends was waiting tables at the same restaurant where my daughter was, and I went to eat there last summer, and he came up to me and he said that he had been friends with both of my sons, but really good friends with Kyler, and I remember they had worked together for a while, and he told me that he got clean from drugs after my son's deaths, and he said he completely stopped doing marijuana in fact, like he stopped doing any kind of drugs. He said, I want you to know that your son's death started a movement in our hometown. And he said, so that when people show up with pills, they're ostracized and they're condemned, But he said, but I think, for how long? How many of the kids in the high schools now know about my son's deaths?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And Ms. Keesling, I'm sure I expressed the sentiment of every member on this committee about your tragic loss. I'm a grandfather, and it would be difficult for any loss for a child or grandchild. So, Mr. Bier, there's a comment that our immigration system has been broken for many years. If what we are seeing at the border now a consequence of that broken system, and if it is, can you kind of share your thoughts on it?
Absolutely, it's a consequence of our broken legal immigration system. If people have a legal opportunity to come to this country, then they do not choose the illegal option. And so what we're seeing at the border is a direct consequence of the decades-long restrictions on legal immigration and legal pathways to come to this country. We have, for example, no year-round temporary work visa for people to come do year-round work in lower-skilled industries. And that is what is driving all of this. Ultimately, what funds smuggler fees and payments, what brings people to the border, whether they're seeking asylum or not. Ultimately, the financing comes from jobs in the United States where there's economic demand for people. And if we had a legal way to fill those jobs, we would not see the crisis that we're seeing at our southern border. And so we have countless examples of instances in which we have stopped illegal immigration by opening up legal channels. We did so in the 1950s with the Bracero Guest Worker Program, which despite its flaws, reduced the amount of illegal immigration by over 90% and kept it very low. It was done away with, and what replaced it was decades of illegal immigration to U.S. farms.
Thank you much. As I said in my opening statement, fixing our broken immigration system will not only help migrants fleeing persecution and poverty, but it'll also help us manage our border, human smuggling, put them out of business, free law enforcement to focus on drug smugglers, and strengthen our economy. I represent a predominantly agricultural district in Mississippi. The migrant labor force is a key to that economy staying healthy. If we can't create a system that allow those individuals to come, whether it's ginning cotton, whether it's picking, harvesting sweet potatoes or whatever, it's a challenge for our farmers. So somewhere we need to put a system in place to make that happen. And I look forward to working with this committee on trying to get that comprehensive immigration reform system put together. Can you explain how more legal pathways to this country would be helpful, not just to migrants, but to America?
Oh, absolutely. First of all, we are dealing with a significant inflation crisis in this country. And the lost productivity that I talked about, the $1 trillion in lost productivity from unfilled open jobs in this country over the last year, would go a long way to reduce prices of goods and services across the economy. When employers can't fill positions, that is lost productivity that comes right out of consumers' pockets. And so the most important economic phenomenon is the fact that we are turning away economic growth by turning away immigrants. And if we want to fill these positions, if we want to expand growth, if we want to bring down inflation, one of the best ways to do so would be to have a legal immigration process for people to enter the country lawfully. And of course, at our borders, we are seeing serious problems. There's no question there are issues at the border as a result of illegal immigration. But with a legal immigration platform for people to apply and cross legally, those problems would be greatly dissipated. We talked about car chases that are injuring Americans. We're talking about recruitment of teenagers to take part in smuggling activities of persons. Those problems would also dissipate under a legal immigration system that actually worked and served the needs of American communities.
Okay, well, if we go another round, I might have another question. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. I now recognize Chairman Higgins from Louisiana for 5 minutes questioning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, it's nauseating to listen to some of this. It's really stunning. I don't know where they find these people that don't get it. Like breed these people in laboratory experiments or something. You're disconnected from reality. It was just a couple of years ago we had the border under control. You whine on about broken immigration systems. What Western nation? Who? Canada? France? Germany? Great Britain? Mexico? All of them have much more restrictive immigration programs and laws than the United States of America. We're the most generous, compassionate, wealthy Western nation in the world for immigration. We want citizens of every land to come to this country legally. Our border is wide open and out of control, and Americans are dying because of it. And I know Secretary Mayorkas is watching this, or having his team of attorneys watch this. Good. Because over the course of the next year, this committee is going to lay out the case against you, sir. If I could arrest you for violations of Louisiana revised statutes, I would. Louisiana revised statute 1432, negligent homicide. Louisiana revised statute 1424, principal to any criminal action. I charge you with thousands of murders as principal too. 18 U.S. Code 1001, you certainly knowingly and willfully lied to this body again and again and again about our border. Section 242, Title 18, under color of law, you've deprived Americans of their very life, including this young lady. The picture behind me, that's Sammy. She's just a little girl, dead from fentanyl. It came under your watch, Secretary Mayorkas. Remember her name. I'm going to see to it that you have plenty of time in the course of your remaining life to remember the names of the 200,000 Americans who are dead because of fentanyl coming across a border that you have blown wide open. Sheriff Lamb, thank you for being here, sir. I'm sure you understand my passion, having to listen to this nonsense. We could fix our border in 1 week. Am I right, Sheriff? If we had policy coming out of the White House that allow you to enforce the law and empower the federal agents on our border that are tasked with securing the sovereignty of our nation against the criminal cartels that control 100% of the Mexican side of our southern border. Could we do it, Sheriff Lamb? Had we done it before as recently as 2019?
Yes, Mr. Higgins, we could do that. Maybe a week might be tight, but 30 to 60 days, we could definitely fix this. We're America. We can stop this when we decide we want to stop it.
When we make a decision to enforce existing law, we can flip this thing around. Sheriff Lamb, in my remaining minute, it's a very disturbing development that we've been watching over the course of the last year or so. These guys crossing the border are increasingly violent, and your men, your deputies are encountering that. Will you characterize the demeanor and purpose of a typical getaway that you encounter in your town and expound upon the increased violence that you're witnessing from these men?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Higgins. Absolutely. We are seeing increased violence more and more. The ranchers along the border very fear for their lives every day. These are military-age men that are avoiding detection at all costs. Many have paid between $6,000 and $12,000 to come here, and that's a lot of money to them, and they're not going back, and they're not going to go down without a fight. We've had traffic stops where they've tried to run my deputies off the road while we're trying to stop a load vehicle. A secondary vehicle will try to run them off the road. We had one such vehicle. We chased all the way back to Phoenix to find it was a female with a 1.5-year-old child and a 5-month-old child in her car with her. Violence is absolutely an option for these people. They have zero regard for human life.
Thank you, Sheriff. Mr. Chairman, I yield.
Gentleman yields. I now recognize Mr. Payne from New Jersey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member. We're the most compassionate, generous country in the West. Tell that to the young people that are still looking for their parents that were separated under the previous administration. Mr. Bier, and I know my friends on the other side don't like to hear it, but fentanyl and other hard drugs are smuggled through ports of entry into the U.S. by, unfortunately, U.S. citizens. These drugs are usually hidden in vehicles, cargo, or on a person in the hopes that it won't be detected by CBP as they process people and goods into the country. What policy changes can we make to allow personnel at ports of entry to focus on interdiction of drugs?
Well, the most important policy change that can be made in this area addresses the demand for drugs. Ultimately, if U.S. consumers are willing to pay for illicit narcotics to come into the country, the black market will supply it. And we've seen that for the last century of prohibition, whether it's alcohol prohibition, whether it's drug prohibition, we have seen this phenomenon. And unfortunately, during the pandemic, when we greatly restricted trade and travel, it forced the shift from heroin to fentanyl, which is a far more potent and more deadly substance. And so I do not believe that there is a solution to fentanyl smuggling at ports of entry. At the end of the day, the black market is supplying drugs to U.S. consumers who are paying for it. And as long as we focus on supply and ignore the drug war victims and not address their needs, not provide them with options to protect themselves against fentanyl, wouldn't it be great if fentanyl test strips were legalized nationwide so that people can know what they're ingesting so they're not ending up like victims that we've heard about today? We need options. We need physicians to be able to actually treat addiction in this country and not be prohibited from for example, prescribing methadone to their patients. So there are options out there. I do not believe that restricting trade and travel and trying to crack down on immigration or even on U.S. citizens travel abroad is the solution to the pandemic of fentanyl poisonings.
And so you're saying that the demand is so great that there's always going to be opportunities for people to try to benefit on that. Is that correct?
Absolutely. For example, marijuana is trafficked between ports of entry. We know this has been the case for decades. We ended up, during the early 2000s, increasing the Border Patrol, doubling the size of the Border Patrol. We doubled the amount of marijuana seizures, but the amount of marijuana in the United States did not go down because the difference in cost of production in Mexico and elsewhere is so low, it's easy to just smuggle some more. And so it didn't work. And in fact, it backfired in that case as well, because marijuana potency, according to the DEA, increased by more than 30% as a result of that crackdown. So we see it again and again and again. Crackdowns produce higher potency drugs, which are more dangerous to drug users. We need to focus on protecting drug users, not more crackdowns, not more border crackdowns, not more banning of asylum. That's not the answer to this problem.
Thank you. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll yield back.
Gentleman yields back. I now recognize Mr. Guest from Mississippi.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sheriff,
Vice Chair Guest.
Sheriff, thank you for being with us today. Seeing in your testimony, you talked specifically about fentanyl pills, that seizures were up 610% since 2020. You heard Mr. Bier just testify a few moments ago that the solution to the drug problem is we must protect drug users. That the solution is we need to legalize fentanyl strips. What, in your opinion, is the solution to the drug problem? Is the solution not to close the border, to stop the drugs from ever entering the country, and not to try to make it easier for people to use and consume illegal drugs?
Yes, Mr. Guest. I agree with you. Have to curb demand. This is like mopping the bathroom floor without turning off the tub water. You've got to turn off the tub water if you're ever going to curb demand. Right now, fentanyl in Arizona is 16% higher than it was all of last year. So think about what that's going to be by the end of this year.
And let me ask you, we just returned from the border. There was a group of 11 members of this committee who went to the border. That is my fourth border visit in approximately 18 months. And every time I've been to the border, Sheriff, I've heard these two statements. One is that it is the worst that the border has ever been, the conditions of the border, both for immigrants coming across the border, human traffic smuggling, drug smuggling, and also we hear that those frontline individuals, yourself, federal law enforcement, state and local officials, feel as though the federal government has abandoned them, that this is no longer a federal problem, and now has dumped this problem in the laps of you and other local officials. Let me ask you, do you share that same opinion that, one, the border is worse than it's ever been in your history of law enforcement, and then two, the feeling that the federal government has abandoned you and the men and women who serve under your command?
Absolutely, it is far, far worse than it's ever been for us. And I do share the opinion that the federal government has abandoned us. We have no line of communication outside of Arizona. And we feel they've turned their back on not only the Border Patrol agents, but they've sent a clear message to us in law enforcement. They're not interested in solving this. And every effort that states like Arizona and Texas make to try to fix this problem on their end, because the federal government is failing, they try to thwart that as well. So we do feel abandoned.
And let me ask you, Sheriff, we know that in early May, Title 42 will be ending. Title 42 under the public health emergency has been a way in which we've been able to return immigrants to their country of origin very quickly. We know that DHS's own numbers, their internal numbers, which they've shared with us and which have been shared publicly, said that they believe that as many as 14,000 immigrants a day will enter the country once Title 42 expires. My public school math, 14,000 immigrants a day at roughly 30 to 31 days, depending on what month you're looking at, 425,000 immigrants a month. Last December was the worst month we had ever had, 250,000. And so we would be looking at adding another 175,000 in addition to the 250 once Title 42 goes away, assuming that the numbers DHS has provided is correct. What would that do to your community?
Well, it will demolish our community, and it will demolish communities like Yuma, and not just mine. What happens in my backyard today will be in your front yard tomorrow, no matter what state you are in.
And explain that statement, very powerful statement. What happens in your backyard today will affect our front yards tomorrow. Explain that statement, please.
They estimate that 50% of all illegal drugs in America come through Arizona's borders, and I would say that 90% of that comes through Pinal County on the I-10 interstate or I-8 interstate on its way to Phoenix. Then it gets transported out to the other states. So when I say what happens in my backyard today will be in your front yard tomorrow, that's what I refer to. And that's not just drugs, it is also humans being trafficked for slavery.
And let me ask you this, Sheriff. We've had testified before this committee before. Secretary Mayorkas has testified on several occasions. He's told both myself and Congressman Bishop to my right that the border's secure. He's also said that in Senate hearings. He said that in interviews that he's given to the media. You there, being just 50 some odd miles from the southwest border, do you agree with that assessment? Do you agree with Secretary Mayorkas that the border is secure?
I'd like to preface this first by saying I tragically lost my son and my granddaughter in December in a car accident. I got a handwritten note from Secretary Mayorkas, which touched my heart deeply, but I do not agree with his sentiment that the border is secure. It is not secure. It has never been more unsecure.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Taylor, first of all, I want to say my heart goes out. I pray for you and your family. Back home, fentanyl is touching everybody that I know. I live in Santa Ana, California. We're about 100 miles away from the border. It's touching us. You know, just a few years back, I was having a conversation with my daughter, who was in high school. Talked about drugs, and she said, "Oh, Daddy, the drugs are all over the place in my high school." I said, "Maybe I should send you to the private school." She said, "Oh, no, Daddy, there's more drugs there because there's more money there." Drug abuse. Bottom line, we all have to come together and make sure we don't lose another death. That's what we have to work for. As I said, I'm about 100 miles away from the border. I've been to San Isidro, Tijuana border crossing about 4 times in this last year. I don't publicize it because my job is to find what the facts are, to make sure we drill down and coming up with a solution. When I was there, Mr. Chairman, I also saw a couple of interesting drug busts. Saw a woman being led from the border crossing on foot from her car. She had a baby in her arms, walking with a 5-year-old child. Looked at the port director and I said, "What's that about?" He said, "We just arrested her. Truck full of drugs." When I walked into the holding area where the cells were, looked at another young lady, also having been arrested for a truck full of narco. And they said, this was an interesting one. That's a Marine reservist whose life is about to change. I met with the port director. I met with officers in green and blue uniforms. And they had one basic message for all of us. Give us the tools we need to do our job. Number one, we've all known it for years. We don't have enough agents out there. They're suffering from morale issues. Why? Because they do double shifts. Forced double shift. Forced. They need dogs to sniff out the drugs. The most effective technology we have are drug-sniffing dogs. They're not there. Finally, we have these neat things called scanners. They said we need more of these. So not just on secondary, but every car that comes through that border is checked for drugs. We've known what they need. We just haven't done our job of getting them the resources. San Isidro, 99% of the trade through that port is good stuff. We need to focus on that 1%. And Sheriff, our statistics are kind of there. Port director told me that in San Isidro, depending on the timeline you measure, anywhere from 50% to 70% of all drug seizures in one port, San Isidro, 70%. We know what the solution is. Let's fix it. Less than 2 minutes I've got left. Mr. Bier, you talk about immigration challenges. I would say the problem we have is at the border, we have a lot of challenges. Fentanyl, drugs, no doubt. But we also have a thing called refugees all over the world right now. I was down there about 9 months ago. Look at the Ukrainian refugee challenge. There is no more Ukrainian refugee challenge at the border because we fixed how to take care of them. Now we have the Russians at the border, along with everybody else. Undocumented, we have 11 million undocumented workers in this country. Many have been here 20 to 30 years. no hope of adjustment of status. In the ag area, 50% of all the workers in the ag industry, undocumented. Let's deport them all and see what happens to our food chain. More workers, Chamber of Commerce. Mr. Bier, I have a lot of questions, but I guess would getting our border officers the resources they're screaming for, would that help stopping fentanyl at the border? Thank you.
Of course, it's going to allow them to interdict more. The most important thing to do with the asylum crisis and to free up Border Patrol's resources so they can interdict as well is to process people at ports of entry. So doing double duty, providing more
Let me interrupt
officers.
you. That's exactly what the border officers told me. Let us focus on that 1%, give us the tool. Thank you very much. Mr. Chair, I yield.
Thank you. The gentleman yields back. I now recognize Mr. Bishop, Chairman Bishop from North Carolina.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Bier, I guess I should say congratulations. Behold your handiwork. This is what you wanted. This is what you've advocated for years. This is what the President wanted. This is what Secretary Mayorkas wanted, what minority members here have relentlessly pursued. You've advocated an open and uncontrolled border, mass immigration. You're in charge.
No, I certainly haven't. I don't know where you're getting that. Where are you getting that?
I'll ask you a question when I'm ready.
Quote something.
I will. Mr. Mayorkas has been willing to flout U.S. immigration law to achieve the mass immigration that they and you favor. And no, the migrants don't become citizens in law, but they certainly come to the United States and they're released into the United States. And you consider that to be a good thing because you think it'll reduce poverty and improve the economy. Let me tell you how that works. There was an article in the New York Times on Saturday. I'm sure you read it. Alone and exploited. Migrant children work brutal jobs across the U.S. Carolina Yoke, who came to the United States on her own last year to live with a relative she had never met. The number of unaccompanied minors entering the United States climbed to a high of 130,000 last year, 3 times what it was 5 years earlier, and this summer is expected to bring another wave. Guess what? The federal government is supposed to be in touch with them and place them with sponsors through the Department of Health and Human Services. But although the Health and HHS calls the minors it sends out a month after they go to live with these sponsors, many of whom they don't know, some of whom are sponsoring 20 children or more, the agency could not reach more than 85,000 children. Overall, the agency lost immediate contact with 1/3 of migrant children. By all means, let's bring more in so more end up in the situation of Carolina Yoke, probably.
So what is the
Or you could go to the article from last July. Smuggling migrants at the border is now a $1 billion business. You say, well, it's because they're illegal. If they weren't illegal, then the Mexican cartels wouldn't be able to charge them the fees that generate $15 billion in revenues. I'd like to ask you how you understand that if they have the pervasive control of the Mexican side that the Border Patrol tells me they have, how come they couldn't continue to charge the fees that they're torturing people over and placing children in indentured servitude in the United States? Why couldn't they continue to do that in a failed narco state of Mexico?
Well, we actually have experience with legal immigration of Mexicans and Central Americans.
You're not going to answer my question about why they can't continue to charge the fees?
We have H-2A guest worker programs that allow people to come, and they're not controlled by the cartels. We should expand those guest worker programs to allow people to come legally.
My question to you, sir, if I'm not going to let you filibuster my time, I'm going to let you answer my question on my time.
You asked me a question, you attacked me.
I'm going to let you answer my question if you answer my question. But that question is, what would prevent cartels from charging legal immigrants if they were coming across en masse?
Well, because we already have experience with this, sir. We have legal immigration. It's just extremely unusual and constrained. We have no year-round guest worker program.
Right. I'm not talking about guest worker programs. I've asked the question twice. You don't want to answer it. That's fine.
That's legal immigration, sir.
Let me say this. In January of this year, in January 5, in Culiacan, there was open warfare between the Mexican military and the Sinaloa cartel as the Mexican military sought to arrest Ovidio Guzman. They burned cars. They had Sinaloa soldiers running around on narco tanks, firing 50 caliber weapons at military aircraft in the air. That's a cartel that you are strengthening with your ideology, sir. And the members of this committee, the minority, who have advocated for this relentlessly, and the President of the United States and Secretary Mayorkas. And if you think it can occur in the United States, just keep going. You can come back then when you're advocates. You know, the other thing you said that's remarkable to me is what you think we need to do is have more legalization of fentanyl across the United States. That sounds like a great plan. I'd suggest you go read San Francisco by Michael Schellenberger about what's happened in that city. It is outrageous. It is as misguided as any policy I've ever seen in the history of mankind. And in the name of humanity,
I said we should
in the
let
name of
doctors.
humaneness, I don't want to hear any more of your economic arguments. I'm concerned about Carolina Yoke and those other people who've been distributed across the country to people they don't know, to homes that don't care for them, to go work in factories as children. That's not the way it's supposed to be, but it is the result of what you have advocated. My time's expired.
It's not the result of what I've advocated at all.
Gentleman's time has expired. I now recognize Mr. Thanadar from Michigan.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My colleagues across the aisle have focused almost single-handedly on the southern border today. We have heard very little about challenges we face at our northern border, which is more than twice as long as our southern border and critical to our economy. In my district in Michigan, many businesses and individuals rely on being able to travel and ship goods regularly across the border. Ensuring customs and border protection has the personnel and resources needed to keep ports of entry open and process people and goods efficiently is essential. Unfortunately, a shortage of pathways for immigration has made our borders very difficult to manage. CBP has had to rely on temporary duty assignments to surge employees where they are most needed, which has often pulled resources away from the northern border. As an immigrant myself, I'm a proud example of how immigrants contribute to American society. I was fortunate to have the opportunity to come to the United States to pursue my PhD in chemistry and then gain citizenship. As a business owner, I have created hundreds of jobs and helped drive innovations. Unfortunately, this American dream is available to far too few. Our immigration system remains extremely restrictive despite a major need for workers among American businesses. Even worse, we often hear rhetoric scapegoating immigrants for increasing crime and taking American jobs when all available evidence shows that immigrants in fact make us safer and grow our economy. When I was applying for a student visa, my visa was denied 4 times. And at the 5th time, when I introduced the same papers that they denied the 4th time, they approved my visa. When I asked why the visa officer changed her mind, I was told that she was in America on her vacation, and another agent looked at my papers and approved them.
I'm glad
Mr.
you didn't give up, sir.
Yes, Mr. Bier, would expanding pathways for legal immigration make it easier for CBP to manage the southern border and in turn allow for more personnel and resources to focus on the northern border as well?
Oh, absolutely. We've already seen it in action with the Ukrainian crisis. We had tens of thousands of Ukrainians showing up. We created a parole process for them so they can fly directly from Europe to the United States with U.S. sponsorship. That program has worked great. They expanded it to Venezuela and Haiti and Nicaragua and Cuba. It's also reducing the number of crossings from those countries now that we have a legal immigration process set up for them. Just give you one other example. There was a story about an Afghan who showed up at our border. We hear about these people who travel thousands and thousands of miles to get here. He won the diversity visa lottery. He had the opportunity to come legally, and as a result of the pandemic, they shut down all the visa processing, so he never got his green card, and then he showed up at our southern border. So the consequences of restricting legal immigration are real for our border communities, and if we can get legal immigration right, we can fix this problem. We need people. You're absolutely right.
Thank you, Mr. Bier, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields. I now recognize Mr. Jimenez from Florida.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And on January 29th, I had a meeting with Secretary Mayorkas where I asked a number of simple questions. He was upset that I was amazed that he didn't have the answer, but he said he had the answer right at his fingertips. So on the 31st, I sent him a letter saying, according to U.S. Customs and Border Protection, over 4.5 million migrants encounters have occurred at the southwest border since President Biden took office. How many of those individuals encountered are currently residing in the United States, and where are they residing? What is the process for choosing location to release individuals, and what sort of information is given to those local authorities? Second question, how many of these individuals have authorized work permits? Do those who receive work permits receive federal government assistance? If so, how many, and how much per individual? Do those individuals who do not have authorized work permits receive federal government assistance? If so, how many, and how much per individual? And finally, according to CBP sources, over 1.2 million known gotaways have evaded the CBP. How many of those have since been located by CBP? What are the current steps being taken by the Department of Homeland Security in processing individuals who have been captured and detained, and how many immigrants who were unknown to DHS have been detained and departed over the past 2 years? He said he had all that information. I asked for the answer to come back in about a week. I've sent this on January 31st. Mr. Chairman, I've yet to receive a response from something that apparently they had at their fingertips. But luckily for me, today I got a call from a friend of mine who has some of the answers. And here are some of the answers. And he said that he was speaking to a friend of ours or a friend of his down in Miami who's recently sent $20,000 to Cuba to have a migrant come over to Mexico, and then they were transported across the borders. So it was $20,000. When the migrant came across, he was immediately given a cell phone, he was given a plane ticket, and he was given $1,600 a month for 6 months in federal assistance. And now, since he hasn't answered me, now I got to multiply 4.7 million times $1,600 times 6 months. It's costing the U.S. taxpayer something north of $45 billion. So it definitely impacted the United States of America. And I want to shift gears here. And Ms. Reisling, I really sympathize with what happened to you personally. I had a death in my family about 4 years ago from drug overdoses. I used to be a paramedic in the city of Miami, where we saw a lot of drug overdoses due to heroin. Never saw anything like fentanyl and the deadly, deadly kind of a drug that fentanyl is. Now, you're absolutely right. Fentanyl has killed, drug overdoses have skyrocketed. Over 100,000 Americans probably per year are dying of fentanyl. Now, can you imagine if a foreign adversary came across the border every single day, killed 200 Americans, and then scurried back, across the border? How we would react to something like that? Well, it's happening every single day. And we have a terrorist organizations, which are the Mexican drug cartels, which are profiting immensely from human trafficking. Where before, in the Trump administration, they made about $500 million a year. Now they're making $13 billion a year on human trafficking. But worse than that, they're killing Americans. Over a little bit over 20 years ago, a terrorist organization came over, killed about 3,000 Americans, And we went and traveled 15,000 miles and waged 15 years of war to get rid of that terrorist organization. We're doing absolutely nothing about a terrorist organization that's killing far more Americans every single year, and we're doing nothing about it. And so, you know, I asked the Secretary of the Director of the FBI if he considered them to be a terrorist organization, and I guess because of some bureaucracy, we just can't label them a terrorist organization. But, you know, we should be doing a heck of a lot more. We should be making them pay for what they're doing to us. And while I agree of an all-and-above solution to our drug problem here with the users, et cetera, I also think that the people that are supplying that weapon that's killing 100,000 Americans every year need to pay the price. And thank you. I yield my time back.
The gentleman yields. Will now recognize Mr. Swalwell from California for his 5 minutes.
Chairman, if it's okay with you, actually I was going to let Mr. Ivey go ahead of me, and then I'll go the next round.
You good with that, Mr. Ranking Member? Okay. Chair recognizes Mr. Ivey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Ranking Member. Thank you, Congressman Swalwell. I appreciate the chance to address the committee on this today. I heard a lot of comments this morning. Negligent homicide, perhaps a military strike in Central America are two of the things I've heard. I'm not ready to go there, I must say, and I hope the United States isn't there either. I think, Mr. Bier, I appreciate your testimony. I'll come back to you in a moment. But one point I wanted to make initially, and with the chart here behind me, is that there are things we can do short of military options or, you know, trying to prosecute the secretary for negligent homicide. And the Democrats have already taken steps to do that. So with respect to the omnibus bill, which is behind me, it's in the blue chart, you can see it up on the monitor. Those are the amounts that we passed last Congress. I wasn't here yet, but that was an omnibus bill. And I say we, based on Democrats, we had 216 Democrats voted for this bill. Only 9 Republicans joined in. I don't think any of them are on this committee. 200 Republicans voted against it. So the talk we're hearing about the things that need to happen and get done, part of that goes to the need to have resources to address it, like more border agents, for example. Mr. Correa talked about the need for surveillance at the border, the ability to check vehicles as they come across ports of entry, and as Mr. Biel, as your testimony points out, I think it's like 86% of the fentanyl and narcotics come across through points of entry as opposed to the other border areas. So why don't we focus on that? Well, the bill we passed helps to do that. And we can go through all of these. I'm short on time, but the point I want to make is on the left side, under the blue, is the money that was passed in the omnibus bill, primarily by Democratic votes. The red side is the Republican legislation that's been offered. I just mentioned most Republicans voted against the omnibus bill that passed last year and is actually sending resources to the border to help address many of these issues. And I know the Biden administration has said that more is going to come when the budget proposal comes out on March 9th. Under the red, though, as you can see, is goose eggs all the way down the page. And that comes from H.R. 29, which was supposedly the Republican leadership bill on addressing this issue. And just for those of you that don't know, the leadership bills are supposed to be statements of that party's focus. These are top priority bills. We need to pass these things to address the key problems facing the American people. And so I picked H.R. 29 because that was designated by House Republicans. We looked at other bills too, and they haven't put out any money for that either that we can find. But I thought H.R. 29 was representative, and they call it the Border Safety and Security Act of 2023. They put up no funds for any of the types of things in the programs you all are talking about or challenges. I know you have different views about what the cause of the problems are and all of that, but I think almost all of them require additional resources. So, you know, from that old movie, I forget, Jerry Maguire, I think it was, Show Me the Money. Your budget shows your priorities. The budget priorities stated by the Republican caucus so far is that they want to talk about, let me get this right, prosecuting Mr. Mayorkas for negligent homicide. They want to talk about removing Mr. Mayorkas from office, but fixing the border crisis, which what I thought this hearing was going to be about. we don't get much conversation about that. Mr. Bier, I've only got a minute. Let me come to you quickly. We just talked a moment ago about the 86% of U.S. citizens are actually carrying the fentanyl across the border. Is that right?
That's right, in 2021.
That's on page 7 of his testimony. By the way, your testimony had 115 footnotes. So in contrast to a lot of the episodic and, that kind of stuff, your testimony is clearly documented with data, which I think is an important way to figure out what sort of policies we should be enacting. 93% of the fentanyl that was seized came through ports of entry. Is that correct?
That's right.
With respect to the legalization, you were accused of wanting to legalize fentanyl. I didn't see that in anything you wrote. I did see you talk about legalizing fentanyl test strips. Is that part of what you're talking
That's right.
about?
Legalizing test strips would enable drug users to make sure that they are not taking fentanyl, which would have prevented the deaths that we're hearing about today.
Yeah, by the way, we've had some of those deaths in Maryland. We're not on the border, but Prince George's County, where I'm from, Montgomery County, Mr. Trone and I put a bill together to address that in part. I support it. I believe it's a bipartisan bill. Hopefully the Republicans on the committee will support that as well. I see I've run out of my time. I'll come back, though. I want to talk to you about the impact of what you've seen in Venezuela, Cuba, and Nicaragua from an immigration standpoint, and the change in the legislation that really addressed the problem there in the ways that you're talking about.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I yield
Time
the
has
balance.
expired. I now recognize Ms. Green from Georgia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have one job in the federal government, and that is to protect the United States of America, our national security, and all Americans, their life, their liberty, and their pursuit of happiness. And since the Biden administration has taken over, there has been a direct result in the number of deaths in this country from fentanyl. I want you to know that in 2020, there were 4.8 thousand pounds of fentanyl seized by CBP. But in 2021, fiscal year 2021, it increased to 11.2 thousand pounds of fentanyl was seized by the CBP. That is a direct result of Biden administration failure policies. Now, here we are, to date, fiscal year 2023, they have already seized 12.5 thousand pounds of fentanyl. The Biden administration is failing this country by not protecting our border and securing our border and stopping Chinese fentanyl from being brought into our country illegally by the cartels, and people are dying every single day because of it. Fentanyl deaths have doubled between 2 years, from April 2019 to April 2021. Those are the statistics we have. Fentanyl deaths doubled from 32,754 to 64,178. This is a complete failure. I want you to know it's affecting every single state in the country. In Georgia, fentanyl deaths have gone up by 230%. In rural Northwest Georgia, my district, the 14th district, we are up 350%. Fentanyl does not discriminate on your skin color, your gender, your politics. Fentanyl kills everyone. It kills police officers, first responders, and tragically, fentanyl is now the #1 cause of death of young Americans ages 18 to 45. And this is unforgivable. The Biden administration is responsible for this, and they have blood on their hands because they refuse to secure our border. Today we have a witness with us, Ms. Keesling. I just want to tell you I am so sorry from one mother to another for the death of your 2 sons that died from fentanyl poisoning. That should never have happened. Should never have happened to you. It should never happen to any family. It happens to families at home where I live. It happens to pretty much everyone we know. And I want to ask you, first I want to thank you for being brave to come here and share your grief with our committee. But Ms. Keesling, would your sons be alive today if our government would secure our southern border?
The year Caleb was born, 2000, there were 20,000 drug-related deaths. And the year they died, it was 5 times as many. And I appreciate you using the term fentanyl poisoning because that's what it was. It wasn't an overdose. They had no idea that they were doing anything that could kill them. And it's because fentanyl got into this country. I heard this man over here from the Cato Institute, talk about, well, it's because of demand. What I'm hearing him say is they asked for it. What the hell? Seriously? Are you kidding me? We need to protect our children. They didn't ask for that. This wasn't demand. They wanted the fentanyl. They didn't want fentanyl. They thought they were getting Percocets. Okay? He's absolutely clueless. Like, total disconnect from what's happening. And to say, oh, let's just give them strips or let's give them rehab. Well, you know what? My kids got my son Caleb went to federal rehab. It was a flop house. It wasn't real rehab. You're wasting your money where you're sending it. I'm telling you, it's a waste of money because it wasn't real rehab. And the government paid for their drugs under COVID. They encouraged them not to stay home. All these young people in our support groups, we all talk about it, how they paid for their drugs with the federal funds under COVID. That gave them incentive not to work. Healthy young people.
Thank you, Ms. Keesling. This government has failed you, and it's failing American families. And it's failing, most of all, it's failing our children and our young people. Thank you very
The
much.
lady's time has expired. I now recognize Mr. Swalwell from California.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll start with Sheriff Lamb. Thank you, sir, for your service in a very hard and challenging part of the country. And I've got 2 brothers who are deputy sheriffs. My dad was a deputy sheriff. I know it's a thankless job. And I guess I just want to ask, if you had 20,000 more Border Patrol agents surged across the southern border, would that make it easier or harder for you to do your job?
Thank you, Mr. Swalwell, for the kind words as well and for your family's service. Absolutely, 20,000 more Border Patrol agents would make a world of difference. I would love more deputies too, so yes, staffing does matter.
And if you were able to have more technologies, whether it's drone technologies, sensor technologies, to work with CBP to monitor and track the border, would that also help?
Yes, sir. We spent a lot of money on helicopter fuel. We spent a lot of resources there. Where I'm at, if I have a regular drone, I have to be with line of sight. Honestly, in my area, I need a drone that's a military-style drone that I can fly for 50 miles. So would love to have a drone.
And do you agree that we need to crack down on any employer who hires an undocumented individual, because by hiring somebody who's undocumented, it incentivizes migration?
I've heard a lot of talk about a lot of things, but I think we're underestimating the amount of lost tax revenue that goes on every year from all the people in the country illegally. We are all paying taxes, and we're footing the bill for a lot of things. There's a lot of lost tax revenue. I do agree that on some levels there should be some crackdowns, but we also need to balance that out with the amount of employment that is needed in this country. This is your job. This is what you guys are good at. And, and respectfully, I would say the last 2 years, one party had command of Congress, Senate, and the presidency and could have passed an immigration bill and didn't do so. And now here we are again now back where both parties are split. So I think there's a lot of help we could get.
And you're right. In 4 years before that, another party had exactly what you described. And I don't want to disvalue the benefit of an immigrant workforce, because my next point is that wouldn't you agree that having a legal immigration system where people who go through the legal process go to the front of the line would be a preferred way to adjudicate those who want to come to the United States, follow the rules, work, pay those taxes?
100% agree. I've lived in the Philippines, I've lived in Panama, I lived in Argentina. I agree that you have to create a common sense path to fill jobs, to give these people an opportunity. Me, along with every other law enforcement and all these people set up here, we want people to come here and make a better life. We just want them to follow the process.
That's right. And what I just described to you was essentially the 2014 President Obama Republican deal in the Senate, where 68 Republicans and Democrats agreed on the framework that I just laid out. And it's my hope that we can get back to that, because I agree with you. I think most Americans, they want to have a border that is safe and secure. They want to have immigrants come to this country and work the jobs that have a necessity to be filled. They want to make sure that there's a background check and that the legal process are the ones that go to the front of the line. And it seems to be that the politics of this overtakes the solutions. On the point of fentanyl, Ms. Keesling, I too want to share my sympathy for you and your family, as someone who knows people who have also died. But I believe that the biggest culprit here, and I think the Republican colleagues of mine agree, is really going after China. I think China has blood on its hands. I don't think President Biden has blood on his hands. I think China has blood on its hands for the fentanyl crisis because, as a number of people have said, overwhelmingly these fentanyl is coming through points of entry, and overwhelmingly it's U.S. citizens. And the fentanyl, we know, is coming from over in China. And I think internationally we should all work to apply more pressure on China to account for what it's doing. And finally, I think Ms. Green is just divorced from reality when she wants to use the fentanyl seizures as a way to beat up on the president, because Sheriff Lamb, you said earlier today that you are literally saving the country with the number of people that you have saved with those seizures. And where I come from, and my brothers make a big seizure that get guns and drugs off the streets, we don't use that to make a political point. We use that to give an attaboy to the police officers for what they did. And so I'm going to give y'all an attaboy for what you've done, and thank you, because you've taken a lot of fentanyl off the streets, and you've made us a lot safer because you've done it. Yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Swalwell.
Gentleman's time has expired. We recognize Mr. Gonzalez from Texas for 5 minutes of question.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm a retired Navy Master Chief. I spent 20 years in the military. I spent 5 years in Iraq and Afghanistan. I fought in 2 wars. I know what war looks like. I know what war smells like. I know what war feels like. We are at war. We are at war with China. Every single day, I just got back from Taiwan. I spent 10 days in the Pacific. Every single day, China attacks us via cyber and our allies. Every single day, China partners with drug cartels, and they poison our children with fentanyl. This is intentional. You see it over and over again. And we got to act like we're at war. We can't have a presidency that views it as competition. It's not competition when China is killing our children. It's not competition when China is poisoning our country. My first question is to Sheriff Lamb. Arizona is very similar to Texas. This is our 3rd year of this crisis. I feel as if Arizona is about a year behind, especially in some of the rural areas. I know my good friend Juan Ciscomani is working on this issue, but one of the questions I have for you is, I've got a bill, the Security First Act, that designates cartels as terrorist organizations. In your opinion, do you think cartels are terrorizing migrants?
Absolutely. You can ask the people that have been decapitated, chopped to pieces, enslaved in the sex trade, the families who have lost loved ones. That strikes terror into the fear of a lot of people and the people that live along that border. So that it would be the definition of a terrorist organization, and I agree that they would qualify as one.
You know, literally every single day I get a text message or I get a call from my constituents saying things are out of control. Yesterday I got a picture of imagine if you're in your house and 5 people walk through your yard. Not who cares if they're American citizens or not. They walk through your area, right? They intrude on your area. My question to you is, what is happening in Arizona? Because it seems it's starting to get more traction. People are starting to see what is happening in other parts of other parts of the country outside of Texas. But once again, the terror for us has not stopped. And what I'm seeing is our constituents, the people that I represent in Del Rio, in Eagle Pass. I mean, earlier today I was with a gentleman named Mr. King from Del Rio that was walking me through it. He goes, "Hey, Tony, I got 2 young kids, 3 and 5-year-olds, and every day I'm under this attack. What is happening in Arizona?
Well, the ranchers can't even let their kids out on their own to ride the range. We have families that are concerned every day. My son fell into an addiction with fentanyl. Luckily, he overcame it and was clean before he ended up passing away in a traffic accident. This is affecting every American family, and Arizonans are not immune from that.
My next question, also to you, Sheriff, is this is what I'm seeing too, is the cartel manipulates our legal system. And I'm very concerned with unaccompanied children. This is something that really isn't getting a lot of attention. I'm curious if you've come across any situations where folks were connecting with a fake parent, if you will. I know a lot of that falls in the Border Patrol area, but when it comes to unaccompanied children, what are you seeing in Arizona?
Yeah, I'm part of the Alliance. I'm the chairman for the Alliance to Combat Transnational Threats, where we work with our federal partners. And I will tell you, contrary to a common belief, the majority of children are being separated by the cartels, not by the American government. We had, I believe, 130,000 unaccompanied minors last year alone. And they are, in many cases, being released back to cartel members because there's no way for them to know where they came from or prove that these are family members. So it's absolutely happening. And they're taking advantage, like you said, of our policies here. They're very astute to what we believe and what we're trying to do.
I sit on, my next question is in regards to funding. One of my colleagues brought up funding earlier. I sit on the Appropriations Committee, and Operation Stone Garden funds is an area, look, money will never solve this problem. Throwing more money at the problem doesn't solve it. But if you put resources towards areas that work, you can tackle the problem correctly. I pushed for 3 years to increase Operation Stone Garden funds. Like I said, that program needs to be refined. They need to kind of take the gloves off, allow them to do some things. But can you speak to Operation Stone Garden? How is that? I know in Texas, one of our counties, in Brewster County, Sheriff Dotson, he was able to add an extra deputy. We in that area, he represents, it's larger than Delaware. Imagine getting an extra deputy, but how is it in Arizona with Stone Garden funds?
We appreciate Operation Stone Garden. It gives us the ability to work with Border Patrol on a daily basis. It funds my helicopter, my fuel, and all these things that we not only use for border security, but we use for search and rescue to save not only smugglers left behind, but to save other citizens that have been hurt while they're hiking or whatever.
Thank you, Sheriff. Chairman, I yield back.
Mr. Chairman, thank you so very much, and I certainly do appreciate the leadership of my ranking member over the decades, I can almost say, and I certainly hope that you will join him, as I know you have great leadership as well, and we have spoken about some issues that we want to work on. Just for the record, Mr. Chairman, we are crafting a fentanyl bill that we hope will draw bipartisan support, and we'll be happy to share it with this committee and the committees that I'm working with, along with the ranking member. To the witnesses, let me thank you for the sacrifice that you've made to even be here today. If we didn't have the opportunity to speak to the American people, we would not have the opportunity to be guided by the American people because we are public servants. I certainly want to say to Mrs. Keesling, and I hope I'm with adequate pronunciation, that you have my deepest sympathy to have the loss and to experience what you've experienced. And we make a promise here, as I've done sitting on this committee, that we will put you first and we will find every solution that we can to keep dangerous criminals, but also to ensure the protection of the American people. So my deepest sympathy to you, and I thank you. Your story is needed in this room today. I also want to thank Sheriff Lamb for certainly representing law enforcement across America. We all have law enforcement in our communities, and I can assure you they are our neighbors as well as our protectors. I just came back from the border briefly with a senatorial delegation and talked to the men and women at CBP, stood by, as in fact walked to the point of demarcation between the United States and Mexico, watched individuals with day passes, I'll just use that as a parochial term, coming legally across, but at the same time watching canines and also being shown a small vehicle driven by an American young woman, unfortunately, that was loaded down with drugs, I think in this instance, marijuana. The CBP felt very comfortable with their ability to detect and to find the amount of drugs coming through the legal points of entry. My concern was this young woman, 19 now, has got a life ruined. They even said to me she probably got $100. I'm hoping not. I'm just stunned that she was not in college or somewhere else that would have been more productive. But I think it sets the narrative that is actually the facts of what we need to deal with in keeping the borders safe. And we know that we have a very extensive border. What you see in San Diego, you may not see in Yuma, you may not see in El Paso, you may not see in Brownsville, Laredo, and otherwise. So I want to indicate that, first of all, the app is working. Not out of my speculative lips, if you will, but out of experts that are at the board. It is working. It is challenging. You have to have the languages. You have to make sure people have access to it, are in places where they can actually connect. But our teams have set up individuals handling the apps. More resources are needed for those handling the apps and receiving the information. But that process seems to have some merit. So I see this has Secretary Mayorkas in here, and let me compliment the Secretary for being an immigrant and rising from his meager beginnings and serving us with great passion and assertiveness and firmness about securing the American border. I want to go to you, Dr. Byers. Our colleague, Congressman Ivey, offered a wonderful array of support that we gave to the system of immigration. $1.88 billion that Democrats did. And I remember about 2004, I offered and worked with then Senator Kerry for a major contribution. So I only have about 10 seconds left. Let me ask you about the Democrats' approach, but more importantly, that one question about our migrant mothers and children bringing over drugs to make us unsafe, or is there another scheme that is being used to bring over those drugs? I'll yield to you.
Right. Asylum seekers are not bringing drugs. They're the ones we heard about who turn themselves in, who request asylum. You're talking about the ones who are waiting at ports of entry to be able to use a phone app in order to apply for asylum. They're not bringing drugs either. We need a process for them to free up law enforcement resources to interdict people who are coming to do harm.
Do you believe that this process that Governor Abbott is using, $4 billion and putting the National Guard at the border, is enhancing any great safety in that particular small area? Would you just give a general assessment on that?
We'll allow 30 seconds.
Mr. Chairman, you're very gracious. I'm sorry, I read the clock wrong. I'm so sorry.
30 seconds.
So sorry.
Look, very, very quickly, I think ultimately what the Texas governor has to deal with is very difficult situation, but we are seeing a lot of people being arrested for very minor crimes and being locked up. They're not getting into the immigration process as they should and are entitled to under our laws.
I thank the gentleman. I thank the chairman.
For an academic curriculum for our military DOD schools that's based on the life of Martin Luther King. I appreciate your partnership in that. I now recognize Mr. LaLota from New York.
Thank you, Chairman. I want to say thanks to our witnesses for being here, especially to you, Ms. Keesling, for having the courage to share your story. I'm the father of 3 wonderful daughters, and I couldn't imagine what you've gone through, so I appreciate you sharing that with us. Hopefully it provides us the perspective and the courage as well to tackle this problem as well. I represent a suburban district on Long Island. We're about 2,000 miles north of the southern border, but because of the country's open borders and my state's sanctuary city policies, New York State has too become a border state. But just this past week, I had the opportunity to visit the border down in El Paso to witness firsthand what is going on with the 1.2 million gotaways and the 100,000 fentanyl poisons that we've had over the past year. 1.2 million gotaways. That's more people than 8 different states. And the reality is our federal government has no idea where these people are. But what we do know is that 100,000 people died from fentanyl poisonings last year, and that's 250 per day, the equivalent of a commercial airliner crashing every day. And we know that that fentanyl is being made in China and being smuggled across the U.S.-Mexico border. And Sheriff Lamb, you noted that the impact of the border crisis isn't just in your state, isn't just in the United States border states, but across the United States. And in my home county of Suffolk, like I said, 2,000 miles north of the southern border, we saw recently we saw 400 deaths due to fentanyl poisoning. And I think that we all agree that more must be done to stop these illegal substances from entering our communities. So my question is to you, Sheriff, what resources do you need to find and seize the illegal drugs that are coming across our borders so that we can best fight this scourge that is killing so many Americans? And what impact, if any, in your opinion, would a wall or a fence or other physical barrier do to help you do your job, sir?
I'll answer the second thing first. The wall absolutely works. I mean, I have a wall around my house. It's not stopping anybody, but it's certainly deterring them from coming into my yard. It is a piece of border security. We got to put that together with the right amount of personnel, the right equipment. All of that works together to do it. My county will always have a problem because we have an Indian reservation that actually goes into Mexico. They won't build a wall there. So even in the good times, we still have people coming through. What we could do is continue to fund or increase the funding for Stone Garden. It gives us the ability to really help Border Patrol. And I would love to see a lot more equipment available for local law enforcement to be able to do it. For us, it's still going out and doing it the old-fashioned way, and that's traffic stops and getting people that are trying to be trafficked through the deserts, the cartels' activities through there.
Can you speak, Sheriff, at all to any of the technology that you could use to help do that job better, sir?
Absolutely, thank you, sir. I would love to have a drone that was a military-type drone because the expense, I need one that flies 50 to 100 miles that we can monitor our desert areas. Because within the desert areas south of my county is where the cartels are pushing people who have criminal records. I don't know if most people know, in the last year, I think it's the last year, even if it was 2 years, there's been over 40,000 people apprehended that had criminal convictions here in America for crimes and that they are also wanted by law enforcement. So think about the amount of people that are getting by us that that are actually criminals already.
And thank you for your dedication to this issue, Sheriff. It matters to your county, but it matters way north in my county as well. Chairman, I yield back.
The gentleman yields. I now recognize Mr. Magaziner from Rhode Island.
Thank you, Chairman. And if you'll indulge me, this is my first time speaking on this committee, so I'm going to just speak for a moment at a high level. My hope is that this committee will work together on a bipartisan basis to enact smart policies to protect Americans against anyone who would do us harm, including by improving our security at our borders and points of entry. Everyone on this committee is going to have a decision to make, whether we are going to work together to get things done, or if we're here for partisan grandstanding. This committee, as I understand it, has a reputation for being one of the more bipartisan committees in Congress historically, where members do work across the aisle in the interest of protecting the safety of the American people, and I hope that that'll continue. That's one of the reasons that I chose to join this committee as a freshman. It's disappointing to me that already I hear not all, not most, but a few members using their time to take shots at the other side or the president or other political figures instead of having a productive conversation about solutions, and I hope that will not be the tone going forward. Because there are plenty of things that we can do to improve safety and security at the border that I think we can all agree on. We should all agree on securing the border and ports of entry by improving technology, by making sure there are adequate resources available, by finding ways to collaborate across agencies and with friendly nations to crack down on human trafficking, drug smuggling, and cartel activity, making the asylum process more efficient so that those who are doing the right thing and looking to do the process the right way don't run into a wall of unnecessary red tape and delays, in addressing the root causes of migration that are causing the vast majority of people to come here. We also have a real and pressing crisis with the opioid epidemic, and particularly fentanyl, that is ravaging our country, and we should attack that problem where it exists. I'm glad that there's been discussion today about the fact that Over the last couple years, more than 90% of fentanyl seizures have occurred at legal ports of entry, with American citizens, unfortunately, making up more than 80% of those apprehended. I don't say that to point fingers at anyone. I just say that to make sure that we focus our time and attention on where the problems are most severe so that we can save the most lives. So we need to do everything that we can to ensure that we stop fentanyl and other drug trafficking by employing the technology and the manpower where it's needed the most. And at the same time, we can't lose sight of the fact that the vast majority of migrants who are coming here seeking entry to the United States at the southern border are doing so because they are fleeing violence and persecution. These are human beings who are running away from something in the vast majority of cases, and they deserve to be treated with humanity and respect. Those are our national values. So I hope as a committee we will endeavor to work together in a sober way to address these and the other challenges that our homeland faces. I hope that going forward we will not lose sight of the fact that the intelligence community has been clear that domestic extremism is one of our other most serious threats. Over the last 3 years, 80 Americans have been killed by violence motivated by domestic extremism, with white supremacy and anti-government extremism being among the most common motivating factors. That we need to redouble our efforts to strengthen our infrastructure and our cybersecurity. We just saw in the last few weeks reports of Vladimir Putin's regime attempting to shut down the electric grids and LNG facilities through cyber attacks in this country in the wake of the invasion of Ukraine a year ago. That is a sobering reminder of how much damage can be done to our country if we let our guard down. So this work is important. We owe it to the American people to focus on all of the threats to the homeland, including those at the southern border. And I look forward to working with my colleagues to do just that. Just expanding on the fentanyl crisis, Dr. Bier, I would ask you once again, in your judgment, where is the biggest source of the problem from a Homeland Security point of view, and what can we do as a committee on a bipartisan basis to stop the flow of these deadly substances into our country?
Well, the heart of the problem is at the ports of entry, and we know this from a lot of different lines of evidence. First of all, we have a very large sample size of people who've been interdicted crossing illegally, and those people are bringing hardly anything fentanyl-wise into the country. The other thing to look at is it's not that Border Patrol cannot interdict drug traffickers. For example, marijuana, 75% of marijuana arrests or seizures occur between ports of entry, and that's because the drug is too bulky in most cases to bring it through the ports. DEA's own investigations have found that it comes through ports of entry. They testified the vast majority come through legal ports of entry. And we also know because the cartels themselves are telling us this because they're warring over control of the ports of entry. They would not be fighting a war over the control of a port of entry if it was not the most valuable place for drugs to enter the country.
Gentleman yields back, and I now recognize Mr. Bier of Oklahoma.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to the witnesses. Thank you for the impassioned plea to change a system that is leading to the death of hundreds of thousands of Americans. As we've talked about today, this is something that's impacting all of us. I've got a young adult that I was close to many years ago. He was actually a part of my church youth group, and I got word 2 weeks ago that he had, through an addiction, a sad addiction. I've not been around this young man for years. He had actually overdosed 2 weeks ago. And within, a text message exchange of condolences to his father, the father's response was, "Nobody should have to go through this." And so, Ms. Keesling, nobody should have to go through what you're experiencing. In 2021, there were 299 fentanyl overdose deaths in my state of Oklahoma. In 2018, that figure was only 39, to your point earlier. That's a staggering, almost 700% increase. And we know it's attributed to what's happening at the southern border. Just this month, an illegal alien pled guilty for an illegal drug operation in Tulsa, Oklahoma, with 3,500 grams of fentanyl powder, 1,300 grams of fentanyl pills were discovered from his home. And that's enough to kill all the residents of Oklahoma City, 650,000 people. 2 weeks ago, a young man, as I described, that I was close to years ago, passed away. It hits home. In addition to that, in my district, in Bartlesville, Oklahoma, there was a 21-year-old named Zach Sanders experimenting with pills, took a pill laced with fentanyl, and he died of a drug overdose in January of 21. And after his death, his mother sponsored a billboard in that city, in Bartlesville, with a photo of Zach and the words that said, "Check your pills, fentanyl kills." What's happening is astounding. Bartlesville Police Department, the city had 12 overdose cases in 2021, and in just the first 10 months of 2022, they had 53 confirmed overdose cases. And we know by the national statistics, the majority of deaths, 18 to 45 years of age, is fentanyl, and the climb of overdoses in correlation to fentanyl. I'm going to hold up a graphic here. It's a penny, and Sheriff Lamb, this is a question to you. From what we know, it's 2 milligrams, which is demonstrated here, of fentanyl sized against the penny. That's technically a lethal dose, enough to kill. And we know that last year, 13,000 pounds of fentanyl was seized in 2023. That's enough to kill 333 million Americans 9 times over. So, Sheriff Lamb, my question to you, in your estimation, describing to Ms. Keesling's point, your children were thinking it's Percocet and ended up being fentanyl. What percentage of what you're seeing, from your experience, boots on the ground, is coming from the cartel of this problem?
100%, sir. 100% is coming from the cartels. And this is also, the fentanyl, it doesn't take much at all. They're putting it in everything. They're putting it in the cocaine, the heroin, the marijuana. They're putting it in everything. And I wanted to mention the xylazine, and I hope I could take just 1 second.
Hey, it's a horse tranquilizer, right?
It's a horse tranquilizer.
I grew up in the horse industry. I'm interested in hearing what you have to say about this.
It's not approved for human use. Here's what is alarming: it is a non-opioid, which means that naloxone and Narcan will be ineffective on it. The Phoenix Fire Department is starting to see it. Other states' departments are starting to see it. So the cartels are starting to add xylazine into the fentanyl, and it will be impervious to the Narcan or the naloxone that we often administer to each other and to other people who are suffering from a poisoning of fentanyl. So
the cartel's running the gamut. And so, as a colleague said earlier, you agreed that we need to see them as a terrorist organization. And in terms of seeing them as a terrorist organization, are they not the new form of organized crime in America, the new mob that we know? As I was on the border last week, and right across from the suburbs of El Paso, that we're hearing about operational citywide control by the cartel. Why should we not be concerned that that is moving into America like the mob was able to take hold of control of areas in the United States?
Mr. Brecken, we should be concerned as Americans. That violence will spill over. It has spilled over, and it will continue to spill over into America. It'll affect American lives. I mean, the fentanyl already is. The DEA, I forgot to tell you, the DEA is now saying that 75% of the fentanyl doses they're finding are lethal doses. That's a staggering number, and it's going to affect a lot of American lives.
And then quickly, Mr. Chairman, to Mr. Bier, do you think we have an invasion at our southern border?
There's certainly a problem at our southern border, yes.
Would you define it as an invasion?
No, not under our Constitution. Constitutionally, an invasion is a military action by a foreign government.
So, Mr. Chairman, I'll just say Article 4, Section 4 guarantees to every state a Republican form of government and protect those states against an invasion. So the witness was very careful in knowing that I probably knew the Constitution and the way he answered that question.
And James Madison agrees with that definition as well. He wrote about what constitutes an invasion under our Constitution as well.
Thank you.
Gentleman yields. I now recognize Mr. Garcia from California.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I want to thank our witnesses, all of them. Thank you very much for being here, especially Ms. Keesling. I'm, of course, like everyone on the committee, I'm very sorry for your loss. I do want to start just my remarks by just making something just crystal clear. Democrats care about human trafficking and taking it on. We care about a safe and secure border. We agree that we need to prosecute and take on drug cartels. And we deeply care about the fentanyl crisis, which we know is happening. It's a serious issue taking on and really causing damage to communities across the country. But in listening to some of our colleagues here today, it's also pretty apparent that we also care about something that many of our Republican colleagues do not care about, and that's an orderly and humane immigration system. Now, I am an immigrant myself. I came to the U.S. As a young child, and I became a U.S. citizen in my early 20s. And I benefited from the last time our country actually passed an immigration reform system, which was actually over 35 years ago. And in fact, it was Ronald Reagan, a Republican president, who signed that bill that allowed me and my family to become U.S. citizens. So I appreciate that. I'm also a small group of members of Congress that are immigrants, and certainly on this committee. I like to say that becoming a U.S. citizen was the proudest day of my life. I know firsthand that immigrants like myself and like my mom, who cleaned houses and worked in clinics, cleaning clinics, are patriotic Americans. I consider myself an American patriot, and I also know that real patriotism, American patriotism, is actually about helping people. We also know that folks that are coming to our country are seeking help. Many are desperate. They're coming because in the tradition of America, this is a place where we afford the American dream to so many from across this world. And we are a nation of immigrants. And so these broad attacks that we're hearing today on immigrants today, I believe, is un-American. Immigrants are not all drug dealers, as some would suggest. And we also, as immigrants, agree that, of course, we need to secure our borders and have an orderly process at our border. And we want to work with our colleagues to also understand that our ports of entry are also places where fentanyl is clearly coming in huge numbers. But we also need to have conversations around drug treatment programs, mental health care, and access to care, none of which is happening today at this committee. And what I don't want to do is conflate asylum seekers with the flow of drugs. Mr. Bier, I want to thank you for your work that you've done on this topic, and I would ask you to remind us once again what the percentage is of all the folks that are arrested by Border Patrol possessing fentanyl. What is actually that percentage?
0.02%.
So not even 1%, correct, sir?
Way less than 1%, less than 0.1%.
And I think that's an important point because you wouldn't know that by hearing from so many of my colleagues here, particularly on the other side of the aisle at this committee. And is it also true that 91% of drug seizures at checkpoints are from U.S. citizens?
That's right.
So contrary to the myth that is being, I think, proposed today by the chairman and so many others, a vast majority of the fentanyl entering the U.S. is actually by U.S. citizens at legal ports of entry. Is that not true?
That's right.
So, and Mr. Bier, consistent with your own research, I believe immigrants are also less likely to commit crimes in this country. Isn't that also true?
That's right. According to the Census Bureau, immigrants, both legal and illegal immigrants, are half as likely to end up behind bars and convicted of crimes in this country than U.S.-born residents.
And it's pretty clear that just listening to some of our colleagues today, you wouldn't know any of those facts to be true. All of that is actually true. It's documented. And I think it's important to continue to raise those, not just in this committee, but across the country. So thank you, sir. I want to note that the Biden administration has also fought for resources to increase a secure border. As we know this, to modernize our infrastructure, technology, support border agents, improve screening at our legal ports of entry. In fact, as we know, the infrastructure bill included $430 million for customs and border protection, of which most Republicans in Congress voted against. And so I think it's important that at this moment we work together to deploy these resources. And today I especially find it troubling that my colleagues are willing to discuss fentanyl at the border, but we don't have witnesses discussing all these treatment programs, drug addiction programs, or ways to help people that are suffering or that need mental health support. This conversation in front of us in this committee is broken and wrong. The American people are being misled by many members of this committee, and in the process are demonizing vulnerable people, including immigrants across this country. I hope we can work together to build a just and humane immigration system in our country, one that respects asylum seekers. I hope that we can get serious about addiction and universal health care. But unfortunately, those are not the conversations that we're having here today. I'm hopeful at the next committee, at the next meeting that we have, that we're not using this committee for political stunts and for misinformation. Mr. Chairman, I yield back my time.
Gentleman yields, and the chair recognizes Ms. Laurel Lee from Florida.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate you holding this hearing, and I appreciate each of our witnesses for being here with us today to discuss this important topic. Since President Biden took office, one simple fact has become clearer and clearer every day. Border security is national security. This is an issue that affects each one of our communities. It is an issue that is endangering our neighborhoods, our families, and our children. In my own community, authorities in Polk County recently confiscated 11 pounds of fentanyl. Following this drug bust, our Attorney General announced that authorities had seized enough fentanyl in just a few months to kill every single Floridian. Our responsibility here is very serious, and I appreciate you all sharing your insights with us today. Sheriff, I'd like to begin with you and return to the subject of your staff, your resources, and the effect this is having on your operation. As a former prosecutor and judge in Florida, I understand the very broad set of responsibilities that our local sheriffs have that include investigating all types of matters, everything from bank robberies to murders, rapes, and things that are happening in the community. Can you tell us, please, how this border crisis is diverting the resources that you have and the deputies that you have away from the other important functions that you are tasked with serving in your community?
Absolutely. Thank you, Ms. Lee. And I just wanted to comment real quick that just because they're American citizens doesn't mean they're not correlated with the cartels and doing their work. The cartels do that on purpose so we can sit in here and make it an immigration issue when it's really about human trafficking and drug trafficking into America. And those people that come here are being victimized. We end up paying the price on the resource level. I have to dedicate my helicopter. We had 10 events yesterday alone where we worked with Border Patrol. One a 911 call, the other 9 of them were groups of people trying to come into this country illegally in camouflage clothes, carpet shoes. I have my 4 canine units dedicated completely to interdiction, catching drugs and people on the way in and money and guns on the way back to Mexico. I have an anti-smuggling unit. We have Stone Garden units. These are all units that should be dedicated to my community to continue to protect them. However, because the federal government is not getting the job done on the border, and this is no knock on our troops, the Border Patrol, ICE, they're phenomenal. They do their job, but they've become babysitters because of the amount of people coming in. And then we end up picking up the slack, and it has a tremendous impact on our resources.
And one thing that I want to be sure we share with the public here today, as a prosecutor, I worked on cases that involved human trafficking, the trafficking of women and children. And I'd like for you to share with us what you're seeing in your community around this horror of human trafficking.
Absolutely. We see every day. We can go out. My guys are out working today. We'll probably stop 3, 4, 5 vehicles piled with people, sometimes up to 15 to 20 people in a single vehicle. That are being trafficked by the cartels, often being extorted because they couldn't pay the full amount at the border or being put into the sex trade. So yeah, these are the impacts that we're seeing, and we're seeing that number increase every day exponentially. And it's not okay as Americans to allow people to be put into the sex trade, whether it's women or children, and the cartel is doing it, and they're using American citizens to do it.
Thank you. Ms. Keesling, I'd like to now take just a moment with you. As the mother of a school-aged child, I think it's very important that part of what we do today is share with parents your story. And if you would, what would you like to share with other parents, parents of school-aged children, about what happened to your sons and what you think our communities and our schools need to know about this crisis?
Starting with the problem with vaping in middle school, I went to the schools, and they're putting the drugs in vaping. It's not just nicotine, but they put things like Molly, all kinds of things go into the vaping, and these kids are getting it at a young age. That was their first addiction, and I did everything a parent should do. There weren't resources at the school. My friend, I mentioned her, my former law partner's husband's a sheriff deputy, he's a detective. He said when there's identity theft, they have a huge packet for everybody. They have stuff on the sheriff's website, everything you need to know how to restore your identity. There's nothing on fentanyl. There's nothing on Narcan. There's nothing that parents need to know. When I asked for resources, we had a sheriff deputy in the school every day. And again, this is top 5 school in the state of Michigan. And they said, well, there's a program you can take your kids to, the jail and have them visit, and that was it. I mean, there were no resources. I asked them for resources, for information for drug addiction. They had nothing. There was nothing for parents like me. And, I tried. It's not for lack of trying. And my kids grew up, their birth mother was a drug addict. She died 6 months after them. Their uncle died a month after them. He was actually doing fentanyl on purpose. My son had 5 times the amount of fentanyl in his system that was enough to kill. Again, this is not an overdose. This is poisoning. It's murder. It's homicide. Please use that language. Please don't say overdose. You need to have Narcan in your home. And the federal program that the state had for the money that they were getting from the federal government for rehab was not real rehab. It was just a flap house. We need real rehab.
Thank you for being here, and thank you for sharing your story. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentlelady yields. I now recognize Ms. Ramirez from Illinois.
Thank you, Chairman. We've heard a lot of fear-mongering and name-calling today. And I have to say, every time our undocumented community is referred to as illegals and criminals, it shows how my Republican colleagues choose to recognize or not recognize someone's basic humanity. And it's a choice, a policy choice with real consequences. As the only member of Congress in a mixed status family, you are saying that my family, my husband and I, should be broken apart. Today's hearing is called Every State is a Border State. And it's clear that the intention is to stake fear and hate. I am proud to represent the people of Illinois, 3rd Congressional District, all people regardless of their status. 12 million of our neighbors are still lacking legal status, and they're facing deportation right now. To be absolutely clear, and I want to make sure it's on the record, we need humane, comprehensive immigration reform, and we need it now. We need to uphold the right to asylum, and in the meantime, we need protections in place against deportation, and we need work permits issued for all 12 million people. Mr. Bier, there are approximately 600,000 DACA recipients. They pay $6.2 billion in federal taxes and $3.3 billion in state and local taxes every single year. DACA recipients, like my husband Boris, aren't children anymore. Many of them are parents themselves, they're homeowners, they're teachers, they are child care workers, they work in our hospitals. These numbers don't even count the many undocumented immigrants who are not DACA recipients, who pay payroll taxes, who pay into Social Security, but can't claim the benefits themselves. I strongly support protecting and expanding Social Security. And at a time when some of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle would even consider cutting Social Security, what are the consequences of deportations on our country's ability to keep Social Security solvent?
Look, the Social Security Administration estimates that we have a shortfall of about 70 million people that we will need by 2050 to keep payments in line with the revenues that they're receiving. So deporting 10 million people would certainly not be in the interest of maintaining Social Security payments. Obviously, people who are in this country are paying taxes. You mentioned the payroll taxes. The vast majority of these people are working through borrowed identification or other means by which they ultimately do pay taxes. So it's not the case that all people who are working under the table, that's not how it happens in most cases.
Thank you. So let's talk about the border. For those of you that know me, know my story well. My mother crossed the border 39 years ago, pregnant of me. If it weren't because she crossed the border, escaping poverty, nearly dying, escaping rape, and all the things that she experienced, this woman here wouldn't be the first Latina in the Midwest in Congress. So first, I want to say thank you to all of the people who courageously risk everything so that they can escape poverty and save their lives, coming to a place where we call America that we love so much. Many immigrants arriving at the southwest border are fleeing dire situations right now. And they're making that journey through jungles and through deserts to the border extremely vulnerable. Recently, the administration proposed a rule limiting migrants' eligibility to apply for asylum with CBP's One App. Now, let me ask you, if they traveled through another country before arriving to the US border and did not seek asylum first, like a similar measure that was attempted with the Trump administration and the courts didn't allow, what would happen to an asylum seeker who did not have access to a smartphone or couldn't use the CBP One App application?
Well, if they cross the border illegally, because that would be their only other option, then they would be removed. The administration is talking about removing people to Mexico again, possibly removing people to their home country if they can. In either case, what we've seen under Remain in Mexico in Title 42 is that when you ban asylum and you send people back to Mexico, they recross the border illegally, it creates a more dangerous and less secure border. We keep hearing about these evasions. Well, if people can request asylum and enter this country legally, then we do not have this problem.
Thank you, Mr. Bier. I would just end in saying that we have to stop criminalizing people and we have to get to the root cause of the problems. That's what I intend to do as committee. I yield back, Chairman.
The gentlelady yields, and I now recognize Mr. D'Esposito of New York.
Thank you, Chairman. First, I want to comment that this past weekend, we made a trip with the Homeland Security Committee. This was my second trip to the border. And at no point in speaking to local business owners, at no point in speaking to educators, in no point in speaking to farmers or law enforcement, at no point did they ask what party we were from. So the claims of my colleagues from the other side that we are politicizing this is absolutely ridiculous. The fact of the matter is that we want to give people the opportunity for the American dream, but we want them to come through the front door, and we want to do it the right way. The Biden border crisis is more than illegal immigration. Criminals, weapons, illegal narcotics are coming across the border in alarming numbers. In fact, the vast majority, 74% of MS-13 members that the Department of Justice have prosecuted from 2016 to 2020 were unlawfully present. Sadly, Long Island is all too familiar with the destruction of violent gangs like MS-13. Just last month, an MS-13 member pled guilty for the murder of an 18-year-old in Cal Meadow Park in my district in March of 21, and the attempted murder of a Nassau County Police Department detective. Sheriff Lamb, I want to first thank you for your service. As a former NYPD detective, I committed, like you, my career to keeping our streets safe, and I know the value of every single layer and level of law enforcement. Can you talk about the differences between your relationship now with the federal government during the current Biden administration versus the last administration?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. D'Esposito, and thank you for your service as well. Night and day difference. Night and day difference. We always have a great working relationship with Border Patrol, ICE agents, but it stops outside of the state of Arizona. As a sheriff, I went to the White House 10 times under the last administration, not for political reasons, but to address these same issues. We felt like we had a seat at the table. We no longer feel like we have a seat at that table.
Thank you. And in what ways do you believe our country's current border policies incentivize gangs and other criminals to enter this country? Specifically the cartel and their involvement.
We can talk politics all day, but when we asked people why they came here, they said because Joe Biden said we could. And this is the reality of what we deal with every day. So clearly the policies that have been, whether you call them open borders or not, they are affecting people coming here, and the cartels are taking advantage and marketing to people in other countries to come. And by default, our lack of policies or weak border security is actually bringing those people to the doorsteps of the cartels to be enslaved, to be taken advantage of. And like Ms. Garcia mentioned, these are good people, many of them, but they're being taken advantage of by the cartels that our policy have encouraged.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you again for your service. As you know, New York City Mayor Eric Adams had to beg for federal assistance for putting arriving aliens in hotels and building makeshift shelters throughout the 5 boroughs. At a rate of $65,116 per individual, our mayor estimates that New York City taxpayers will need to spend $2.8 billion with a B, in the next fiscal year to deal with the rapid influx. Doctor, according to your testimony, as CEO of the Yuma Regional Medical Center, your hospital has seen a massive influx of migrants seeking care starting in the fall of 2021. It's similar to the educators that we spoke to across the border, and quite frankly, the ones that I'm talking to across Long Island that are having budget shortfalls because they don't budget for the new individuals coming to the school in the school year. How many of these migrants have no way to pay for the care provided in your facilities? And can you speak to the true cost of Joe Biden's border crisis on the American economy?
We've not received any compensation for any of the migrants that we've provided care to. The border policy has been significant for us. As I said, Yuma's got a population of 100,000 people. We've had 300,000 people cross the border, and we're the only hospital they can come to. All that care provided to them is for free. It impacts our organization significantly. Those are dollars we would normally put back into the community, put back into resources to serve additional folks.
Well, Doctor, I guess you would probably agree it's not free. We're paying for it. It's definitely not free.
Correct.
Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The chair recognizes Mr. Goldman from New York.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sheriff Lamb, do you believe that Donald Trump won the 2020 election?
Well, Joe Biden's the president now.
No, what do you believe?
I believe that he lost the election. I mean, there's questions about how our election integrity, I don't know how that relates to Homeland Security, but I have questions, and I think
you don't know how election integrity relates to Homeland Security? Is that your testimony?
My testimony is it does relate because we're seeing how bad it's been under the last 2 years. So yes, it has a correlation.
Election
However,
integrity?
What's that?
You said you don't believe election integrity relates to Homeland Security. Is that your testimony?
I don't know how this election, the question of whether I think the last president won or lost, it is about this today. Election integrity absolutely matters.
Okay.
And I believe that there are a lot of Americans that have questions about election integrity. And my job is to make sure that we ensure that we have safe and secure elections.
Do you believe that there was fraud in the 2020 election?
There's always fraud in every election.
Really?
There's significant, however many people it is, there are people that vote for people that are no longer, that are deceased. There are people that vote when they don't live in a certain residence.
You're right. So let me ask you this question. Do you think that there was fraud that had a material impact on the results of the 2020 election?
As a law enforcement official, I have seen zero evidence that would show me otherwise.
Right. Do you believe that those people who invaded the Capitol on January 6th were, quote, very loving Christian people, unquote?
I think that there were a lot of good people there that were exercising their First Amendment right, and I think they have, in many ways, been lumped in with a group of people that had bad intentions.
Okay. So you would agree that not everyone at the Capitol on January 6th would be considered a loving person?
I agree that there were people that violated the law, and I think those people are being held accountable.
Okay, because you have been quoted as saying that the rioters who were there on January 6th were very loving Christian people. Did you see the videos of that day on January 6th?
Yes, sir. I've seen a lot of videos where there were a lot of good people that were not rioting, and you're saying that the rioters, that's different than the people who were coming and exercising their First Amendment rights.
So you don't
people had
support
every right to exercise their First Amendment
you
rights.
don't support the rioters who beat the police and invaded the Capitol. Is that right?
Absolutely not. I am a rule of law guy, and if you broke the law, you should be held accountable.
So do you support then the 950 prosecutions that the Department of Justice has brought arising out of the events of that day?
Well, I know nothing of those 950 prosecutions. I wasn't there for them. I don't know the details of those cases. So for me to come and say that I support every one would be a little bit naive because I don't have the information.
Sure. Do you support the 10 convictions that the DOJ has obtained for seditious conspiracy?
I am unaware of the 10 convictions, nor do I know anything about those cases.
Really? Because they involve the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers. Are you familiar with those?
I am aware of the
organizations?
Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers.
Have you ever interacted with them or spent any time with them?
I know what you're alluding to. I went to a 2A rally and had some people come shake my hand who I now, somebody says they're Proud Boys. They had no indication of that, so.
Did you host a rally for your future Senate run where there were Oath Keepers and Proud Boys there?
No, I did not host a rally. There was a 2A rally where I mentioned that I was strongly considering a Senate run, where I have now learned that there were some Proud Boys there.
Would you agree with me that seditious conspiracy is a conspiracy to overthrow the government through violence?
I'm not sure what the code says exactly, but that sounds pretty familiar.
Okay. And would you agree that the violent overthrow of our government is a threat to our national security?
Absolutely.
I asked that question because you've been on record as questioning many things about the 2020 election, many things about the January 6th events, and you just said that election integrity is not directly related to the subject of our hearing today, which is our Homeland Security. And I'm happy to hear that you agree with me that the conspiring to overthrow our government, as members of the Proud Boys and Oath Keepers were convicted of, is a threat to our Homeland Security and is a threat to our national security. Last question. Do you think that the Mexican drug cartels were created in 2020?
No.
They've been around for a long time,
Yes.
haven't they? Okay. I yield back. Thank you.
Gentleman's time has expired, and the chair recognizes Mr. Ezell from Mississippi.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the opportunity to discuss how the Biden administration's failure to secure the border affects not just the states along the southern border, but also spreads through communities in Mississippi and across our nation. Sheriff Lamb, first I want to thank you for your service and your willingness to testify today. As a former sheriff, I applaud the work that your deputies and yourself are doing, and I know the increase in drug seizures has been great and a big burden upon you. However, as we both know, the more illicit drugs that are caught, the more we are missing. Based on your experience, how have the drug trafficking networks expanded their operations since 2020?
They've expanded their operations tremendously. As we heard earlier, one of the members mentioned they were making about $500 million a year. They are now making about $13 billion a year. And they're doing it large in part on taking advantage of these people that are trying to come make a better life for themselves. They are paying cash up front, which is only emboldening the cartels and giving them a lot of money on hand to be able to buy weapons and increase their footprint along our southern border.
Thank you. What action should the federal government take to stop the flow of illegal drugs into our communities?
We should secure our southern border. That includes continuing building the wall where it hasn't been built, increasing the amount of Border Patrol agents we have, increasing technology, turning on the technology that is there that has not been turned on for political reasons. These are all things that need to happen so that we can continue to get back to securing our border and helping these people who are being trafficked and the drugs from killing American lives.
Thank you for that. Unfortunately, fentanyl poisonings continue to surge. In a single year, fentanyl deaths more than doubled in my home state of Mississippi. In your testimony, you call the I-10 corridor that runs straight through my district, and I'd like to hold up this photo of an I-10 seizure in Jackson County, Mississippi, which is over 1,000 miles away from the southern border. Here you can see 29 pounds of mixed heroin and fentanyl, which was found in a single traffic stop. Clearly, border counties are not the only ones affected by this crisis. Does your department have the resources it needs to handle the surges in smuggling and traffic incidents?
No, sir, we do not have the resources. We do the best we can with what we have. We're proud of what we do stop, but there's a lot more that needs to be done.
When you come in contact with a human drug smuggler, how does your department determine where these criminals are heading?
Through a series of questioning, we have a lot of guys that are very skilled at what they do in interdiction, recognizing things that don't line up in their statements, and then we start to work that back and figure out where it came from. A lot of them, as you can imagine, don't like to talk to us and don't like to tell the truth, but we do the best we can to find out where they came from.
One problem that we had in Jackson County, which is still a problem, if we end up taking one of these folks that we've arrested to the hospital, do you have to spend resources and manpower on sitting on that person that's in the hospital?
Mr. Ezel, yes, in the case that they committed a crime, let's say they ran from us and we pursued them, there was a crime, we would have to sit on them until we could book them in. In a case where there was no crime committed, we would not have to go sit with them. They would be turned over to Border Patrol, and Border Patrol would likely take that.
But that would take a man off of his duties on patrol and have to sit in the hospital.
Yes, sir, it would.
Well, thank you for your answer. The Biden administration has allowed the crisis at the border to persist, and as we have shown today, every state is a border state. And with that, Mr. Chair, I yield back.
Gentleman yields. The chair now recognizes Ms. Clark from New York.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I thank our ranking member, I thank our witnesses for their testimony here today. The mission of the Homeland Enterprise is vast and complex. It's important for the success of the Homeland mission that we focus on the challenges of law enforcement in the midst of an urgent migrant crisis and the conflation of the opioid and fentanyl crisis with asylum seeking is quite unfortunate. It distracts from the real work of surging resources and personnel required to win against drug cartels and drug dealers. As the daughter of immigrants, I find it extremely distasteful to sit here and look at how we've used the plight of our fellow Americans to exploit what is clearly xenophobia. Ms. Keesling, I am deeply sorry for your loss. But I know that with the proper resources dedicated to drug programs, drug rehabilitation, education, some of the things that you mentioned to some of my colleagues that you did not have access to in your child's high school, we could save many more lives. And I hope that you'll become a more vocal advocate for delivering those resources to your community, because I'll stand shoulder to shoulder with you in making those resources available. And Dr. Trenchel, you have a hospital that could do great work in that space. I hope you too will become an advocate for the type of treatment that our nation needs to get past what has been a decades-long addiction crisis. Our decades-long broken immigration system needs reform. I'm hopeful that when we clear the air of the smoke that has been, the smoke screen that's been erected by those who would use our crisis of addiction to demonize those migrants who have risked life and limb seeking safety and freedom in one of the greatest nations in the world, that we will get down to the business of a 21st century immigration system in the United States of America. Mr. Bier, you mentioned that immigrants to be key contributors to our economy, and having a restrictive immigration system only leads to millions of people who want to contribute their skills and hard work to do so illegally, which leads to violations of the law. How can we ensure that immigrants, who are big contributors to the American economy, can have lawful pathways while they are awaiting legal status without the fear of being ripped away overnight and sent back to the dangerous conditions from which they've escaped?
We have to start by looking at what's causing people to come to the border. Of course, when you look at Cuba and Venezuela, these are socialist governments that have destroyed their economies and trapped people in poverty for many years now. Nicaragua is going in an authoritarian way. We've seen what's happening in Central America with the violence and crime there. Mexico, we hear all the testimony about the cartels and the violence that is occurring. People are coming because they're being driven out, not because they really want to leave their homes. And so we need processes and procedures that allow them to apply to come legally. And that will free up resources for law enforcement to come. We've already seen successful programs to do this, whether it be the Ukrainian program we talked about earlier, or the programs for Venezuela and these other countries that were just rolled out in January, saw a massive drop in people arriving. That's because people know if they can apply legally, if there's a viable shot, they will go the legal route because of all of the risks coming illegally to this country.
Thank you very much, and not to mention Haiti.
Of course, right, I'm sorry for...
With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you. At this time, I recognize the gentleman from the great state of Alabama, Mr. Strong.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To the witnesses, I thank each of you for joining us here today. As my colleagues mentioned, last weekend, several of us were able to make a trip to the southern border and witness firsthand this administration's border crisis. This trip confirmed what we already knew to be true: our southern border is in crisis. It's hard to imagine anyone could reach a different conclusion. The impacts are felt all around the country. My district specifically has seen a drastic rise in the number of fentanyl-related deaths. We're also seeing more drugs on the streets, which many local law enforcement officers attribute to the Mexican cartels and this administration's immigration policies. I've spent almost 4 decades as a firefighter, emergency medical technician, and have personally worked over 100 overdoses. I believe it's no coincidence that the last 2 years have seen a drastic uptick in these calls. I have several photos here to share with you today. Each of these are from drug busts in Madison County, Alabama, within the last 6 months. I'm proud of the tireless work of the law enforcement officials to get these drugs off the streets of our community. These 3 pictures alone amount to enough fentanyl to kill the entire population of Alabama. This is from only 2 seizures in Madison County, each of which originated in Mexico. You will notice that in these pictures, stacked team badge number 12, that right there is Officer Billy Clardy's badge. He went to Sparkman High School. We went to school together. He was killed in Huntsville, Alabama on December the 6th, 2019, working to protect North Alabama from these drugs, and was killed by a drug dealer. This issue is not a Republican issue. It is not a Democratic issue. It's an American issue. North, South, East, West, rich, poor, black, white, Latino, Indian. Drugs do not discriminate. Every family has been affected one way or the other. Fentanyl, heroin, cocaine, human smuggling is rampant at the southern border. No American is safe. Ms. Keesling, I'm sorry for the circumstances that have brought you to this United States, to this hearing. No parent should have to experience what you have. As a father, my heart goes out to you. You may have seen reports that a province in Canada will decriminalize possession of several drugs, including heroin, morphine, fentanyl, cocaine, methamphetamine, and MDMA. Do you think this is the right approach to take?
In Oregon, they've been legalizing or decriminalizing a bunch of different drugs. Fentanyl is not something that you can just control like that. Fentanyl is used for anesthesia and surgeries. You have to have an anesthesiologist present to make sure someone doesn't die. Okay, were we going to have a country full of anesthesiologists provided for all of them? I heard him say, "Oh, let's make fentanyl strips available." So many of the children that are dying are young. They have no knowledge of anything like this. You think the drug dealers they're trying to kill off our children. The reason why they're adding this new drug in the sedative for tranquilizer for horses is because they don't want them to be saved by Narcan. They're trying to kill off our population. This is a war.
Thank you. You mentioned that drugs were indeed from Mexico. Does it make you feel better to hear this administration says there's no crisis at the southern border?
That's complete ignorance. That's absolutely clueless to say something like that.
Thank you. Sheriff Lamb, thank you for being before us. I've had an opportunity to meet you once before. In your testimony, you highlighted the importance of local law enforcement in dealing with the crisis at the border. Over the last several years, some of my colleagues across the aisle have called to defund law enforcement and police. What would that mean for local efforts at the border if law enforcement agencies did not receive, if they were to start cutting funding?
That's a great question, sir. And if you cut out the local funding, it would be even worse of a problem. A lot of the stops you're seeing, a lot of the help, the drug busts are happening on a local level because it's getting through the borders. So even though they say 90% is happening at the checkpoints, in Arizona it's 52 and 48%.
You got it.
So the majority of ours is, half of it is still coming through between the checkpoints.
Thank you. Dr. Trenchel, as you are well aware, we have an opioid crisis in the United States, particularly with fentanyl's rise in popularity. Prior to the border crisis, how often would you say that you have treated patients for fentanyl poisoning?
It's definitely gone up since the borders were opened. I don't have those specific numbers, but it's definitely an increase.
Thank you. Within the last 2 years, have you experienced an increase in treating patients with fentanyl poisoning?
Yes, we have.
Could you please describe what the treatment for fentanyl poisoning entails and the average cost to treat?
Expired.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I now recognize Ms. Titus from Nevada.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, we've heard a lot about fentanyl, which is tragic, certainly. Everybody agrees with that. And also other illegal drugs brought by criminals, brought by drug dealers, brought by cartels. This is a crisis at the border. But I want to go back to something Mr. Swalwell brought up a little bit, just for emphasis. I'd like to remind this hearing and these folks who are here that when this came up for us to consider putting more resources into fighting this drug carrying over the southern border, there were all but two Republicans who are currently serving in this Congress voted against the appropriations bill. All but two voted against it. Now, that appropriations bill had critical provisions to help DHS manage the border. It included $400 million for inspection systems to detect drugs. I'd like to hear from those people who think this is such a big problem, why they didn't vote for the resources to go after it, so we wouldn't have tragedies like the deaths from fentanyl. We wouldn't have the cartels coming over here. We wouldn't have the crisis at the border. We would be doing something about it. But no, only two Republicans voted for those resources in the appropriations bill to deal with these questions, these problems, these crises that you all have mentioned and harped on throughout this hearing. I'd like to change the subject just a little bit to talk about the immigrant communities in this country. I live in Las Vegas. It's an international city. People from all over the world come there, and people from all over the world live there. We have growing populations from Asia as well as from Latin America. They work back of the house, front of the house, gardening. They are contributing members to the community. And I have a lot of mixed status families. You will have one person who is a citizen, one person who is a dreamer, one person on TPS, and one person who may not even know what their status is. But they are all contributing to the economy. Mr. Bier, would you talk a little bit about some of the ways, positive ways, that immigrants who come here do make contributions to our economy, to our culture, to our society in general?
Of course. I mentioned $250 billion in state and local tax revenues that are paid by these people. They work at higher rates. They are employed in occupations that actually create jobs for other U.S. workers. So if you look at a restaurant, you'll see the immigrants. A lot of times they'll be working in the back of the restaurant, creating jobs for Americans in the front of the restaurant. The same thing goes on across the entire economy. These people are contributors. They're expanding the economy by trillions of dollars every year. That's helping bring down the cost of goods and services, because the more our economy grows, the more items are available on the shelves of every store in America. And that's a benefit directly to Americans.
I just met with the National Franchise Association and the Latin Chamber in Las Vegas. And we were talking about how franchises often help people become more prosperous and contribute to the community because they fund the little league teams and things like that. Most of the franchises in Las Vegas have been opened in the last several years by immigrants, women. Immigrant women are going into small businesses and building those numbers just as you see.
And we know that immigrants are twice as likely to be entrepreneurs than U.S.-born residents. It's part of their culture, right? If you're willing to get up and be entrepreneurial enough to come and change what country you're living in, you are willing to take another risk to start a business and contribute in that way, which also benefits consumers by having another option available to them.
Could you mention briefly, you said it before, but about the guest worker programs that could go all year that might be helpful to areas dependent on tourism like Las Vegas?
Oh, absolutely. So we have 2 seasonal guest worker programs for non-agricultural and agricultural, but you cannot get a guest worker visa for industries like dairy and livestock that are year-round and have a need throughout the season. Of course, also in Las Vegas, you're dealing with tourism. Again, they're ineligible for these visas because of the fact that you have to show it's a seasonal nature, a temporary job. And so that restriction is ultimately creating this process why people come over to fill those jobs. They're coming in illegally because there's not a legal option available to them.
It's no longer just a season in Las Vegas. It's a year-round.
Yes, absolutely. And it's, the growth of tourism industry in many places, desperate for workers. And you're seeing, I've seen it, I'm sure every member of this committee has seen it, the decline in service as a result of the worker shortage throughout the country.
Thank you very much. I yield back.
The gentlelady yields. Without objection, the gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Siscomani, is permitted to sit on this panel and ask questions of the witnesses.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to my fellow members of the committee for allowing me to waive onto this committee as a guest, to have the opportunity to discuss such an important issue to my community. I want to thank the panel as well for taking the time to be here with us. A little background, I was born in Mexico. I'm an immigrant myself. First time I was in Capitol Hill was in 2003 as an intern, and I still had a green card at that time as an adult. I'm back now 20 years later as a member of Congress. Only in America can we have these kind of opportunities. This is the land of opportunity, and like Mr. Garcia and Mrs. Ramirez, we enjoy the opportunities this country offered us and our parents. And that's why I'm so proud to be here, so proud to be an American, and so proud to be an immigrant as well, serving in Congress today. I really believe that we can have a conversation about immigration and about border security. I care about both. I've lived both, obviously, being an immigrant and also living in the border community. And today, I think it's important to focus the issue on what we're talking about. In my case, in my question for the sheriff, thank you for being here, Sheriff Lamb, and I appreciate your time and making the trip up here. It's always good to see you at home, but always nice to see you here as well. It's around the area that we've been discussing around fentanyl. And in Arizona, fentanyl trafficking has taken its toll on our communities. More than 8,600 pounds of fentanyl have been seized along the southwest border in our first 4 months in this fiscal year. This is enough to kill more than 1.9 million people. Could you speak on the impact that this has on our young children and those who are true victims? And I want to take the chance real quick to, ma'am, offer you my deepest condolences. I'm a dad of 6. 3 boys and 3 girls. I can't imagine the pain that you've gone through, and I thank you for your bravery and being here. I've actually spoken to 2 different mothers this last week that have lost their children to this tragic crisis. Sheriff, would you mind speaking on the fentanyl issue, please?
Yes, sir. Thank you. It's always great seeing you too, Mr. Siscomani. Yeah, the fentanyl is the leading cause of death, not just amongst Americans between the ages of 18 and 45. It is the leading cause of death amongst children in Arizona. 44 children in 2021 died from fentanyl poisonings. 7 were under the age of 1, 2 were under the age of 5. Those are some staggering statistics. In my county, we've had we are at 73 in 2021 people that were poisoned, not just children. And now the number is currently sitting at 61 until we get all the numbers back in from the medical examiner. We will exceed that 73 as well. So it's a big problem for our children. Here's the key point, and it's been mentioned earlier. It is 100% preventable. In our jail, I do a ton of reentry programs. I help people with mental health addiction, drug addiction. We work tirelessly because inevitably the sheriff's office, we are your de facto mental health institutes, and we have to deal with more addiction issues than most people do. And so we work hard to try to stop it, but it is affecting our children.
Thank you, Sheriff. And I'll take one more question. I want to be respectful of the time. Right on the I-10 that goes through your entire county, I call that, and many others too, the artery of our state for trade, for commerce, for transportation between the 2 major cities in the state, also for trafficking. And one of the things that we've been seeing is an increase in high-speed chases in this area, many that are starting in Cochise County and then go through Pima County and also Pinal County, where lives are being lost, not only of bystanders and innocent drivers, but also of those being trafficked in these infamous rollovers that we're seeing an increase on. Would you mind touching on that as well, please?
Absolutely. One of the statistics we had is 461% increase in the last 2 years for pursuits involving human trafficking. A lot of times these are kids driving, so they run and they have 10 people in their car. A lot of times they'll lose control of the vehicle, causing the injury and death to not just themselves sometimes or innocent citizens, but also to those people that are just trying to come here to make a better life. They become the victims of this as well.
Thank you, Sheriff. Again, thank you to the panel, and thank you to my colleagues. And Mr. Chair, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back, and the chair recognizes Mr. Garbarino from New York.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the ranking member for having this hearing, and to all of our witnesses who have been here for quite a long time today. We really appreciate it, but this just shows, I think, I've been here, this is my 3rd year here, and this is probably one of the best attended hearings from members with all the questions, so I think you can all understand how important this issue is. I'm from New York, as you heard, Long Island, and as we've heard today, that fentanyl does not discriminate. No family, no community, no region is safe from the threats presented by trafficking of fentanyl across the border. In 2021, Suffolk County, where I'm from, lost 425 residents to overdoses from opioid pain relievers, including fentanyl. New York State Health Commissioner reported last year that 3/4 of all overdose deaths in New York State now involve fentanyl. Sheriff Lamb, you mentioned in your testimony the number of fentanyl pills seized by your deputies increased by 610% since 2020. I know you just, my colleague, you just answered a couple of questions about what your deputies are doing. Can you get a little more involved into what some of the technologies your team has found useful in detecting these pills that the cartels are bringing over?
Absolutely. Thank you, sir. There is a lot of technology you can use that will test the density of the vehicle to be able to see if they're packing it inside the vehicles. But a lot of this stuff is very rudimental. We had a vehicle that we stopped that had 3 trays of food in it. Our deputies were searching the car, moved one of the trays. It was heavier than it probably should have been. They stuck a stick inside the tray. It only went down about this deep and a tray this deep. So then they scraped the food back only to find 3 trays had 227,000 fentanyl pills in those trays of food. We also stopped a car that had a driver. The passenger in the front seat was dressed as a nun. She had a veil over her face. She had a Bible on her lap. Our investigation ended up revealing that she had 8 pounds of granular fentanyl, which would kill millions of people, underneath her dress in that traffic stop. They will use every tactic they can.
So what do you need from us? What kind of tools can we send you?
Well, I'm a big states' rights guy. I would love for the government to back off and let the states do our deal. But
I mean, if we could send you some technology or some, some actual, what technology could we do? Not rules, not mandates, but what could we give you? What could Congress send you that would help you do your job?
And sir, I appreciate you asking that. I would love, we could use drones. We could use some of these I'm not sure, the thermal machines that actually read the thermal of the vehicle. Honestly, we could just use more funding for resources, getting our guys out on the streets. A lot of this has stopped, just like I mentioned earlier, with good old-fashioned police work and the guys not willing to give up.
I appreciate that. I'm not sure if the clock started, but I guess
I think it started, yeah, I think your time is up.
I'll yield back. Thank you.
All right. The gentleman yields, and I think the ranking member wanted to add something to the record, so I now recognize Mr. Thompson for the purpose of placing something into the record.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I ask unanimous consent to submit statements from the First Focus Campaign for Children, Human Rights First, and Coalition for Human Immigrant Rights.
So ordered. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, or Mr. Ranking Member. I want to thank the witnesses for being here. This concludes our first full hearing in this Congress. I want to thank the members for their time and their congeniality through most of this. We have differences of opinion, very clearly, but I think everyone wants what's best for our country. To our witnesses, Ms. Keesling, thank you for sharing your heart and the tragedy that occurred to you. Sheriff, the challenges you're facing, I appreciate your time today. Dr. Trenchel, really appreciate you. We spent probably more of the time, and appropriately so, on the human costs. But as we go forward throughout this Congress, there'll be more opportunities to delve into the financial costs of what's going on as well. Mr. Bier, I appreciate you, and I appreciate your passion. Thanks for being here. You know, we've heard a lot today that the crisis is due to a lack of resources. Before I close, I want to make the point that, you know, the budget didn't decrease in January 21. The number of people on the border didn't decrease on January 21. But a massive surge of people came across our border then. What changed was the removal of some significant policies that had been shown to work. And I think it's very important to stress that. I think resources are needed, and I agree with the comments from both sides of the aisle on that issue. But I want to stress the massive wave, 4.7 million, 1.2 million gotaways, more than the past two administrations combined, didn't happen because we cut the budget or we cut the people. It happened because the president cut the policies. And with that, we will stand adjourned. What we're going to do, before I adjourn us, we're going to take a 15-minute break. We have to reset for the votes on the oversight plan. It looks like votes on the floor are delaying a little bit, so we'll be able to knock that out. So for this hearing today, again, thank our witnesses, thank our members. We stand adjourned.
Mm-hmm.